All right. Oop. I don't know why my mic boom is suddenly very tense and just wants to fling the mic up at my face. Stay down. Right there. No. Huh. Weird. Stop. Why is it suddenly wanting to do that? Hold on. I need you at the proper distance, but okay, I think that's good enough. Hopefully the audio. All right, I think that did it. Okay, cool. All right, so, and if you see me keep looking over to the right, it's because the stream is over on the right on OBS on my right-hand screen. Welcome to episode 86 of the Pathfinders podcast. I am Trio311 and I am your host. Here on the podcast, we are charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen, Squadron 42, and their development. If you didn't catch, oh my gosh, I can't talk. If you didn't catch last week's show, and you're wondering, hey, why does this look different? Where's Nazareth? Just as a reminder to everyone, Nazareth has decided that it's time for him to, I guess, move on. He's had plans in the works to relocate in real life, move out of state, move out on his own, get a new job for a while now. And those plans are finally coming to fruition. And so it means that he does not have the time to do the podcast or to stream anymore. And so I am very supportive of this. It's something he's been wanting to do. I'm very happy for him. I'm sad for the show. I'm sad for me because it means that even though he and I still chat, it means we don't get to hang out on a regular basis. And he's become a good friend of mine. And so I will miss his good company and miss interacting with him on the podcast as well as planning for the podcast. But I wish him all the best. And I hope what he's doing and what he's working towards is nothing but successful because he deserves it. For now, I'm doing the show by myself. I do have designs towards doing some answer the call type call-ins. I would really like, because I do, if you guys have watched the show, you guys know that I really enjoy interacting with all of you and chatting with all of you. So I may do that. I may invite guest hosts. I may look into finding a permanent co-host. But for the time being, and especially because I'm still pretty busy right now, I'm just focusing on doing the show on a regular basis for my own enjoyment and to interact with you guys, as well as, you know, as I've said many times, this is my therapy. I get a lot out of doing the reading and the background research for the podcast segments and reading the monthly reports. I get a lot out of interacting with you guys as a community and chatting with you guys live as well as in my Discord. It's something that I enjoy, and it helps me, maintain good mental health. So it's something I want to keep going, and honestly need to keep going. So without further ado, tonight we are going to be covering the Roadmap Roundup from July 2nd, a few days ago. That came out on Wednesday with the first additions to 4.3. So that's pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited for those. Actually, I'm going to tweak my camera a little bit. There we go. Bring it a little bit farther down. We're also going to read the June monthly report. Some really good information in there. Surprisingly, the core gameplay team segment was really short compared to how it's usually been. So that's, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. And then I have, for the second podcast in a row, I have one of our regular segments. Last podcast was a Spectrum Pulse on dropships and the lore, tech, and features that go into achieving Star Citizen's vision for dropships and what their intent is. This week we're doing a Scanner Anomaly. A reminder, Spectrum Pulse is where I cover a topic that is something of note within the community. A pulse across the spectrum, both spectrum, kind of like spectrum is the in-universe internet, but it's also our forums for Star Citizen. And a Scanner Anomaly is where I do a deep dive into something that has piqued my interest, and something that I think is worth discussing with all of you guys. And so this week's Scanner Anomaly is I'm going to be concepting what might go into search and rescue missions in Star Citizen. It's something that I'm personally very passionate about because that's what I do real life. I'm a civilian and Army National Guard flight paramedic. I've also been a firefighter before. I was a 911 ground paramedic before that. I've also worked in search and rescue as well, as a part of a search and rescue team, not just search and rescue with the Army, and as a flight medic. So it's something I'm very passionate about in real life, and it's something I'm really looking forward to seeing in Star Citizen, seeing them execute on. And I think there's a lot that people don't realize could go into these missions that also might be the reason that they got started working on them and then stopped and haven't heard from them since, is because they have a lot more potential that CIG wasn't able to realize at the time. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and switch screens and we will get into the Roadmap Roundup. Alrighty, here we go. So, July 2nd Roadmap Roundup. And now that Nazareth isn't here, I will be reading the preamble. I miss you, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Hey, Shimpasta07, good to see you, friendo. How you doing? So, every 2 weeks, we accompany the roadmap update with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision-making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who help make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. Just a reminder, the 1.0 column showcases features and content planned for inclusion in or before Star Citizen 1.0. This means you may not have to wait for this 1.0 release to experience them. As features content in the 1.0 column become ready, they'll migrate left into a point patch column for release. Be sure to check back every 2 weeks for the latest updates. With that, let's dive into this week's Roadmap Roundup. CIG Community Team. All right, so notable changes for July 2nd. The release view, 4.2.1, new hairstyles. The adding 2 additional hairstyles, this has been set to tentative. The global event tracking service. So this is what they're using for the progress on... oh gosh, I just brain farted on the name. But it's where we're all collecting resources and doing stuff for the 4 major corporations in Stanton to further the goal, the supposed goal of addressing the issue with regeneration that's going on in the verse right now as part of their ongoing narrative. And so a lot of especially when it comes to missions and events in game, a lot of the new things that we're seeing as content rolls out is because they are taking advantage, finding ways to take advantage of new tech and services and features that are being developed as a part of ongoing development and testing those things, and that's why, like with the I don't think it's a spoiler. The new escort missions. If you've heard about, I think we're going to read about those. I think that, or no, those are in P2 right now, if I remember correctly. Sorry, the patches are dropping and changing so fast. It's hard to remember what is where. But like those new escort missions, where a ship pops out of a hangar, and then you have to escort it, or you have to escort it to a hangar. That's new tech, and they are putting missions in specifically for us to test out that tech feature in order to figure out, make sure it works, and then they will use that to build additional missions, and not just missions, but remember the mission system is modular. So every mission is made up of different modules that they chain together. And so we'll be talking about that more tonight when we talk about rescue missions. But the Global Event Tracking Service, that's a new service. And this part of the narrative that we're doing with the resource drive is to take advantage of that service. And we were going to see more uses of that service in the future. This is just the initial rollout, and so they're testing it with this part of an event. And so we're going to see that continue to develop and become more robust in the future. There we go, the Second Life resource drive. So implementing a new system, allowing our systems to track players' progression across multiple shards. This is important because it's tied into essentially every shard. And this is something that it's tech that has to tie into server meshing and also has to continue to work as they develop dynamic server meshing. Because they can't, it can't be individualized across individual shards. These things are going to be global. The system will first be used in conjunction with our new global event coming in Alpha 4.2.1. It can be found in the Moby-Glass Journal Second Life resource drive. This card has been set to tentative. Missions collection, improving Wicklow Emporium's missions, allowing players to specifically focus on the ships and gear they want to unlock. I haven't read too much about that, but I'm glad that they are. They were talking about improvements to Wicklow and usability, and also make it more robust. Because I can't tell you how many times I've heard about people losing favors after turning them in, like they just disappear into thin air. So there's been a lot of development on that to make it more usable. Wicklow is a great first edition of that type. We definitely need a whole lot more of them, but before they add more of them, we need to make sure that this one is right and works as intended. Pardon me, I'm still dealing with these lingering effects of this cold, so still some congestion and coughing. Missions collection, medium utility armor. Strata Corporation liveries, adding a new medium utility armor, Strata Corporation liveries, as rewards for participating in 4.2.1's global event. This card has been set to tentative. I really like the look of that armor. It's the one that they showed off. Actually, tell you what, we're going to pull up the release view so we can look at the images. I like the look of that armor. They showed it off at CitizenCon. And let's see, characters, it's this guy. So that armor. So it's a full set, including backpack. And so it looks like we're going to get a livery for each major corporation. I don't know, and if you are listening to this live or watching it later on YouTube, if you can let me know in the comments. I don't know if they have said anything about a non-corporation livery. Obviously, you can see Crusader, ArcCore, Hurston, and Microtech right there. But I would like to see a plain one, or just standard colors and different types of liveries. What?
Did we just become best friends?
Hey, BlizzRad07, thanks for coming in and hanging out. Thanks for renewing your sub and keeping up the support. Really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the liveries and seeing that armor. It's a utility armor, and so I'm also one of the things I really can't wait for, and I can't emphasize this enough, is seeing how suits and armors get differentiated more to professions like they talked about at CitizenCon, and the different benefits. And that's something that I'm going to talk about when we talk about rescue missions, because they have talked about, that's one thing that I forgot. You can see all my links up here. That's one thing I forgot to pull up is, I think it was CitizenCon 2020, maybe it was 2019. Richard Tyler was up on stage and they were talking about, again, way back, this is something they've gone over multiple times. Hey, North End Trooper 07, good to see you, buddy. You dropped in chat and I didn't even have to say hacking. But that was one of the armor types that they talked about, was a medic armor or medic specific armor. And I forgot to pull up that link. But I will mention it when we talk about Maverick6907. Good to see you. Thanks for dropping by. Hope you're doing well. Happy Independence Day, America. And if you're in the UK or part of the Commonwealth, bloody rebels. So yeah, I'm interested in that armor. I'm definitely more of a utilitarian guy, especially when I'm doing my 0 to hero. So I'm excited to acquire that. I'm going to be playing a lot more over the next, at least the next month. Mid-August, I have to go away for 2 weeks for the Army, and I'll be gone for 3 weeks in September. So I won't get to play as much, and the podcast will be a little bit irregular over the next in August and September. But this month and before I leave, I definitely want to be involved in the event and earn that armor. Especially, I'm thinking Microtech is probably going to be my shtick, because I want to earn it on my 0 to hero. I'll probably earn it on both, but definitely my 0 to hero. Okay, so 4.3. And 4.3 should be the August patch, if I remember correctly. The first addition to the 4.3 patch on the roadmap, cooperative zones. As soon as I read that first word, I got super excited. If you've hung out in my Discord at all, you know that there's an entire section dedicated to co-op games. And I have streamed many times playing co-op games like Helldivers and Starship Troopers and Deep Rock Galactic. I love co-op gameplay. I could not... Hey, glad to see you here live with me, Maverick. I appreciate you coming in and tuning in live. Hopefully we'll be able to get together more often. But yeah, it's just I wish I could stream earlier in the day, but I got to wait until the rest of the family goes to bed. So late it is. Well, late for most people. It's 8 o'clock my time. But yeah, I love co-op games. I could not care less about PvP in my MMOs. It's not something I'm ever been interested in MMOs. Well, for the most part. There are very few PvP orientated things that I've really enjoyed in my MMOs. I'm really there for the PvE content, and I love doing things cooperatively. The only PvP I'm really interested in is FPS shooters for the most part. So, cooperative zones. And again, I'm cautiously optimistic. And also very curious. So let's read the description. So not an event, not a sandbox, like contested zones, but the opposite. Okay. Where investigation, puzzle solving, and cooperation with players around you will make completing objectives easier. So with the feature set that we have in game in Star Citizen right now, it's going to be interesting to see what they have in mind when it comes to puzzle solving and cooperation and investigation. And obviously, this is a first outing on this, and that will be expanded upon and likely made a lot more interesting as different features that are adjacent to those sorts of things come along. But if it's something that I can get together with a small group and we can go do and have fun, and I am all about it. That's like A, the type of gameplay I like, and B, something I love to do on stream. So I'm very curious to see what these entail. And the image for that, let's see, we'll close that. With the gameplay, there we go, cooperative zones. So the image is of an ASD facility, and we'll read more about those in a second, because that's another thing I'm super curious about. So, abandoned underground facilities. So, located on every moon of the Stanton system, these enormous multi-level structures are used for the new cooperative zones coming in Alpha 4.3. This card has been set to tentative. So if you remember, back during the development of distribution centers, they used to be called the new UGFs. And instead of calling them the new UGFs, that's the thing. Is this a distribution center that's abandoned, but they're calling it an abandoned underground facility? Is this like the underground facilities that we already have, but reworked to look abandoned? Because when they say enormous, it doesn't make me think the current UGFs we have. Remember, they had described the UGFs we have now as the small variant, and the DCs we were getting were medium. And so they eventually have plans for a large, essentially. But they are multi-level, and the ones we have now are technically multi-level. I mean, there's a surface level, the elevator goes down, but then there's multiple floors. You go downstairs and stuff. So it's hard to know what, or is this a new archetype of point of interest location entirely, that is entirely different than what we've had or seen before. And if you remember the concept art for the distribution centers, some of the latter concept art did show off abandoned and sort of derelict looking underground portions, because they focused heavily on that. So we don't know. But in my opinion, I think this leans more towards a new POI type. Simply because they say underground facilities and not abandoned distribution centers. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So I'm going to be optimistic towards that. If it's just reskinned UGFs and they call those enormous, I'm going to be real disappointed. Hey, Socially Confused, good evening. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for dropping by and coming and hang out with us. So, but these are to be used for the new cooperative zones coming in Alpha 4.3. Now, I've heard that the objectives are related to doing a mission for the doctor, the mad scientist doctor guy, from the ASD facilities in Pyro. Maverick69 says, I think I saw the original concept video for the UGFs that showed a huge elevator that went down multiple floors and was massive in area. Oh, yeah, the Space Tomato has shown that many times. The UGFs we have are not what they had. It's what they could get in time for CitizenCon 2948, if I remember correctly. It's what they could get in time, and so that's why they haven't further developed those a whole lot more. Because they got them in, and then they went on to other things, and they didn't quite, they didn't cut the mustard for what they're looking for. But then they've since gone back and they added those, they redid those UGFs in Rastar, and to allow for more variety on the surface, obviously, but that didn't ever change anything below the surface. So maybe this is taking what we have now and expanding upon it to include the original vision and reskinning it for ASD and to look abandoned. That's a thought. I don't know. Either way, it's a new location, and I really like the distribution centers. The only problem is there's zero variety between them other than the branding. And that's a problem to me. It's just copy paste. The other POI that we have in Stanton are the really old outposts that are just, other than the freight elevators, are dying for an update. Just absolutely dying for an update. They are so dated and so static. And they're, those need a refresh for sure. But then after that, it's just derelict looking stuff, the scrap outposts, and I'm not into that aesthetic. I'm not into it at all. It's not my thing, and so we don't have anything in between. We have Pyro, which has outposts that are either lawful or unlawful, but it's just a whole bunch of scrap looking stuff, other than the DCs and the really old outposts and the really old UGFs in Stanton. And so I'm really hopeful for getting some new flavor and stuff that fits within the Stanton area. Yeah, settlements that aren't run down. Why don't we have towns? It's a long time coming. Yeah, I'm just happy for content. This year has been a very good year for me just because it's things to do. Yeah. Things to do, new places to go, and things to see. But I want, you've got huge disparities in the type and archetype of locations in Stanton, and it just feels a little bit disjointed to me. Hey, Mishral19K, good to see you. Thanks for coming by and hanging out. Hope you're doing well. 07s. The Volt Laser Sniper Zenith, implementing the latest in the Volt series of weapons. The art on, not my type of weapon, not my bag, but the art on these is really well done. Whoever's putting these together has done a bang-up job. The Sniper Light Armor Geist, adding a new Sniper Light Armor Geist, specialized in stealth gameplay with high mobility. So the question is, they are adding this sniper armor with these, specialized in stealth gameplay with high mobility. If you remember them talking about that sort of stuff in CitizenCon in terms of signatures and detection and movement, how, other than we have light, medium, and heavy right now, stealth, is there going to be more coming in 4.3 that we don't know about? Or is that just eventually it'll be stealth, and for now it's not? Medium utility armor, Ambrose. Yay, more utility armor coming in 4.3.x. So let's... characters. Oh, no picture yet. There's the sniper armor. They showed this one off at CitizenCon, right? That's the one they showed off, yeah. More new hairstyles. Ladder improvements. Improving the reliability and use of ladders in game. I'm more of a, Maverick says, I'm more of a DMR guy, to be honest, but I appreciate a solid sniper rifle when I come across one in game for sure. Yeah, I'm always been a DMR battle rifle guy. That's always been my bag. And even though a lot of games, they are poorly balanced, I think that the challenge of using them, especially, is makes it more rewarding. You know, you give me, like, I have an M01A in my garage. In my garage safe, it's just you know, one shot, one kill. Hey, danger hobo, dang, 36 minutes late to Operation Tree reads the long ones. Hey, at least you made it though. Yeah, DMRs and battle rifles, you know, semi-auto and a heavier round, one shot, one mortgage. Yeah, that statement tells you may live in Idaho. Well, actually, I bought it when I was living in Reno, but it is part of the reason I moved to Idaho. Is I lived in Reno, and so I did quite a bit of shooting out in the desert when I lived in Reno, and that's when I bought my SIG 556XI there.
Part of the crew.
Hey, Maverick, thanks for the follow.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew,
Part of the
part
crew,
of the
part of the
ship.
ship.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Yeah, I have mine in the Archangel stock, and so it's legit. With a Vortex, it's a 3x10, if I remember. I haven't shot in a while. But yeah, like I bought that. I bought the Springfield M1A. I bought my SIG 556XI. My P320, all when I lived in Reno, and then I took a job in California and moved back to California and flew there as flight medic for several years. And all of my modern guns were very illegal in California, so they just sat in my safe, you know, hidden in my garage for over 3 years, and didn't shoot them once. And so that's part of the reason I moved to Idaho. Is I was like, no, I want to shoot my guns, you know, and I'm for sure, you know, I have a bunch of inherited weapons that, you know, just by not having them registered in California are illegal. And I was like, there's no way I'm in hell I'm registering my family heirlooms, you know, get fucked. So yeah. Ladder improvements. So improving the reliability and use of ladders in game. Thank goodness, because they are janky. My question is, will that impact the animations for getting in and out of cockpits? Are those ladders? Or just the very specific straight up ladders? And is it ladders at locations? Does it count for ladders within ships going up and down in the, say, the Carrack or the Valkyrie? And they say reliability and use. As far as I can recall, they never changed it so that way you could get off a ladder mid-climb going, like the Carrack's ladder goes up across all three decks, and you can't really get off of it, you know, mid-climb. So, or at least it couldn't last time I used it. So that's one thing. And one thing that drives me nuts is you go down a ladder and it cants your head. I don't know why it does that, but it drives me nuts. AI FPS turrets, adding anti-personnel turrets for players to avoid or destroy, providing additional PvE challenges. Heck yeah. That will make things real interesting. I imagine they're probably going to be limited at first, most likely at the new abandoned underground facilities, but we shall see. But definitely something that is overdue. Socially Confused says, we had a neighbor in the sticks of Nampa who restored a Sherman tank. He wanted the vehicle he used in World War II. He told the best stories. That was back in the 80s. I wonder what happened to that tank. I don't know. Maybe it got donated. I don't know if we have a Sherman on display on Gowan. Now think about it. Yeah. Mission pickup on location, and this should be interesting. Enabling new missions to be discovered and added to journals when you approach or enter a designated area. Again, this is one of those things where this is being enabled by ongoing work on the mission system. So they did the mission system refactor, and now we're on the new mission system, and they're working towards the mission system 2.0. So that it's one thing that people have been sleeping on like crazy is they've been hard at work on further developing the mission system, and so and that's something that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about concepting the rescue missions is the more development they do on different bits of tech and features within the mission system, the more interesting and the more engaging and complex and varied our missions will get and contracts will get in game. Missions, contracts, events, the whole shebang. So being able to go to a location and suddenly you get a notification that says, hey, there's a mission related to that location that you can accept or not. That's a new thing that's being enabled by development of the mission system. And so it'll be interesting to see the nature of those missions, where they pop up. Are there things that trigger them? Are they chained to missions that you took to take you there? So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Danger Over says you could buy them for scrap value when they got decommissioned. Who has space for a howitzer though? Yeah, I mean, unless you live out in the sticks and you got a shop. Because they made. Gosh, how many Shermans do you think they made in World War II and beyond? I mean, it's got to be many tens of thousands at least. I don't know. A lot. A whole lot. Wicklow special ships. 50,000. Tell you what, let's Google it. So, Sherman tank. Let's see. It says tens of thousands were distributed through the Lend-Lease program. Sorry, it's white. Number built 49,234. Dang, North End Trooper, you were like spot on. I mean, that wouldn't have passed for Price is Right rules, but still, like right on there. Nearly 50,000 German tanks. That's nuts. Yeah, considering most of the Allied nations had them in inventories, and lots of countries were still using them up until like very recently, if Price was wrong. I've always wanted to go to the tank museum in the UK. I do like the videos and their parade thing that they show off every year is always really incredible. I'm glad I got into Arty instead of tanks. Putting a track back on seems like an all-day deal. Not only an all-day deal, but back-breaking work. Oh my gosh. Drake needs to make a tank like the Tiger II. Except for Drake wouldn't make the Tiger II. The Tiger II is complex and over-engineered and expensive. You know, that would be like an anvil thing, or maybe Aegis. I've done it in the dark, in the snow, or rain. Ew. Yeah, no thanks. Wicklow special ships. Adding the following special ships to Wicklow's Emporium: Misk Starlancer Tac, Drake Golem, and Volterrapin Medic with upgraded components. These ships can be unlocked by bringing the NPC Wicklow a number of favors in exchange of rewards. Excellent. Good to see. More Wicklow rewards. More play to win. All right, so that is it for the July 2nd Roadmap Roundup. Lots of really good additions. 4.3. I mean, if that's the first edition, and that's the August patch, and we're at the beginning of July, 4.3 could be a very interesting patch. Could be a lot of fun, I think. So let's go ahead and we will switch screens to this one real quick, and I'll pull up the monthly report. And I do that, guys, just so I get a nice, neat little timestamp for when I break this up into segments to upload on my YouTube. But also the whole video, I also put the timestamps in there, the segments, sections, whatever they call it. All right, so I got the monthly report up. So let's go ahead and switch back to the other screen. And since we're about to start on the June monthly report, I figure it's a good time to remind everybody that, as always, if you can see down at the bottom, very obvious, I am always streaming in support of StackUp.org. I keep no monetization for myself, so if you're hanging out here with me this evening and you suffer through the ads, just know that monetization will go to StackUp.org. I actually need to make a community donation from my last payout from Twitch. And if you subscribe to my channel because you hate ads or you like the content or both, just know that your patronage goes to supporting StackUp.org as well. So thank you, Blizzrad, for renewing your subscription. I think, yeah, he was the only new sub tonight. So I really appreciate any support you guys can lend. If you don't remember what StackUp is all about, they connect veterans and members of the military with video games and video game community, video game communities, or not video games, but gaming games and gaming communities, because they do board games and TTRPGs and stuff to combat the effects of PTSD and being separated from your friends, your family, your support groups. So like when you're deployed or stationed overseas and such, or just far away. So obviously, as a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and a current member of the Idaho Army National Guard, supporting veterans like me is a big deal. I have PTSD, and obviously here I am hanging out with a gaming community as part of what I do to help maintain good mental health and combat the effects of my own PTSD. So thank you to all of you, and thank you for your support, and I hope you'll consider supporting StackUp.org. If you want to learn more about them, you can put !StackUp in chat, and then you can also put !charity in chat to get the link to my Tiltify, so that way you can donate as part of my donation drive this year. And of course, I'm wearing my StackUp t-shirt. Every year they, depending on how much money you raise, they send you some goodies. And so I think this is one of the t-shirts I have, and I've got two. I've got one from last year and one from the year before's. Oh gosh, what do they call it? But the every year is a new segment, something like that. Anyway, so here is a picture of what they talked about in the Roadmap Roundup with the new service for tracking global events. So it's in your journal entry right here, Stanton's Race to Regen. I don't know if that's the best place for it. I feel like because all these things are here and they've been here for a long time, that this is going to get lost or people will forget to check it. But there it is. So you can see the your total, the system's total, so you can track your progress, and the total progress for each corporation. And so it looks like you get a different reward at each tier in terms of total SCU. Yeah, I'm going to be, maybe in RepTab is better. Yeah, RepTab or something. I don't know. I don't know if there's a better way to do it. It's good that they have this in there though, and I'm sure that they will iterate on this. And this isn't the final version, but it's the back end portion of being able to track all this that's important. So interesting to see what the rewards are, because obviously, they talked about the Strata utility armor, but what other, do you only get a reward at the top end, or are there rewards at 20, 40, and 60,000? I'm going to be doing Microtech. Yep. Yeah. So let's get in the monthly report. June was a busy month at CIG, with most teams making final updates towards Alpha 4.2 and upcoming content. Read on for all the details of last month's development, including the latest from the ship's AI tech and core gameplay teams. Oh, whoops, I need to move this off to here. And nope. Hold on. Hold on one sec. I wish you could, the dark mode thing could be per window, because I've got my Google Doc for the podcast over here on the right, and it's in white, and I hate looking at it in white. I mean, you can drive out if the hangars are in-op at Microtech too. But one thing is, Benoit did say that they just rolled out some fixes that should be addressing the issue with hangars being broken at your home location. So we will see if that, because I had that in 4.1.1. I had that issue. And it doesn't seem to be bothering me yet in 4.2. Pardon me. So AI content. June saw AI content meeting with the directors and combat AI team to keep pushing the development of the updated combatant wildline script. This new line set covers both FPS and dogfighting NPCs and provides a much needed update to the enemies players have been fighting for years. The having wildlines in game as you're playing, regardless of where you're at, and hopefully it'll be coming to not just combatants, but a lot more of the NPCs coming around and other people that you interact with in non-combat missions. Hopefully we'll have more interaction or NPCs walking around to affiliate with in non-combat missions. But it definitely helps the universe feel a lot more alive rather than just a whole bunch of mimes essentially walking around, doing a whole lot of not much. This new line set, the team is currently looking into leveraging dynamic conversations while keeping the line sets concise enough to potentially offer gang-specific voice packs. That'll be interesting if that can work out to really up the flavor and variety. However, conversations and prototyping are required before they can begin capturing this content. Outside of combat, the team updated civilian behaviors to utilize additional lines that haven't been used yet and to make them feel more reactive in more environments. Good, because a lot of the times I know that these behaviors do need more work. Part of it is still just, the servers are better performing, but the keeping everything in sync is difficult. And so the NPCs get out of sync, they get stuck in different behaviors, they don't react appropriately, and so there's a lot of optimization to go on there. But the They need more wild lines. They need more behaviors. They need more reactions. They need to react more reliably, and they need to come out of reactions. If somebody pulls out a gun where they shouldn't have it, and everybody cowers, and then they leave, they shouldn't still be cowering an hour later. AI features. Last month, AI features completed their tasks for the irradiated Valakar, which made its debut in the PU. This was the culmination of months of hard work by cross-disciplinary teams, including AI features and tech, animation, gameplay, programming, art, VFX, audio, design, and weapons. We're really enjoying the lovely feedback that the community has given fighting this giant. It's making us very excited for future creatures and encounters to come. AI features. I thought about using my alt, but I plan on keeping my alt as a stock account to experience the game without any benefits. Ooh. Yeah, that's something. Because my alt is my 0 to hero. And right now, like, it's like, okay, well, this is my 0 to hero, but I keep getting free things added to the account just by having an account. A paid account. And so that is something to consider. Yeah. I will probably just use my main. You're right. So the latter part of the month was focused on bug fixing, including edge cases where Valakar didn't emerge, despawned too soon, or failed to spit during its emerge animation. Improvements were also made to the juvenile and adult Valakar, including changes to their positioning to prevent overlap, and better handling of unreachable targets. This also informed a fix for Copion chasing targets that become unreachable. Better handling of unreachable. Okay, so like if you're out of the zone or behind, a building or something like that. The team then continued to develop upcoming creatures, the details of which will be shared in the coming months. Upcoming creatures. Oh, it'll be interesting to see what comes next, and where and how much variety. Any thoughts on how the irradiated Valakar looks and plays at the moment? I have not played against it. I've watched other people play against it, so that's my only perspective. I think, from what I've seen, when it's working correctly, and I have hardly seen, only a few issues of it, not performing correctly, I think it's pretty cool. I think it seems to be working pretty well. I think the animations could tend to be smoothed out a little bit. But I think that it seems to be for all the Valakar, so I don't know if it's a systemic thing or what. Yeah, it is nice to have a true 0 to hero count. I do really like that they have an irradiated version that's pretty well differentiated, and we now have radiation damage, radiation zones. It bodes well for other damage types, which is something to be excited about. So when they talk about new creatures, it'll be interesting to see if we get a poison type, or I don't know what else they could have. Major and minor bugs were fixed for human combat alongside additional behavior work. This included aiming improvements to consider what part of the enemy is visible. For example, aiming specifically at the head if the chest is obstructed. Support was also added for NPCs using advanced weapon types, such as beam weapons or lasers that can overheat. It'll be really cool to see NPCs with more variety in the weapons that they're using. It seems like it's mostly I see a lot of FS9s, the BR2 shotguns, the SR71s, and the what's the bearing rifle? The P4. Yeah, whenever animations don't play smoothly, I'm with you, Maverick. Whenever they don't play smoothly, it's like, yep, that breaks my immersion. That totally takes me out of the game. And I've seen the juveniles and the adults. I haven't gone and fought the Apex. And I've seen it in all of those. I've seen it in the ones I've seen, and I've also seen it when I've seen other people playing the Apex. And so to me, but I've also seen it among the Copion and the Marak and like all the creatures. Their animations don't seem to sync up right. I don't know what the issue is. I'm not, because they transition from one animation to another, and if they have to be in sync with the server, does the server have to I don't know how those work. And so I don't know why those jankiness is coming in. The smaller ones do seem more prone to wobbling in place. Yeah, and I had a theory that was due to the size of the zone that they spawned in, and limiting their movement ability because they're like sort of coming out of one area. And so like maybe if they stretch that zone out, they wouldn't look so weird. But yeah. Updates were made to NPCs searching and looting ammo and weapons. The medical animation flow was polished to remove pops. I don't know what they mean by pops. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I have seen the NPCs doing the sort of look at a downed comrade and hitting them with a med pen. I hope that we will see them using med guns, the paramed device in the future. That would be pretty immersive. And more control, like an actual medic. The acronyms are getting out of hand. And more control was given to the designers over friendly fire parameters. Fixes were made to perception, audio propagation, combat investigation, and grenades. I have had issues with some perception, like NPCs a long ways off, some of them not perceiving like me at all when I'm fairly close, and other times them perceiving me like the instant I show an arm out from behind cover and they're 150 yards away and dialing in. It's sometimes it makes things challenging in a good way, and other times it's like, okay, this is not working as intended, that shouldn't have occurred, that's frustrating. It does seem like a server client issue though. Good point though, they do look kind of like they are bound to a small moving box, and that makes them jittery. And I don't know if the Valakar use or are tied to the same system with the it's not tiling, but that allows for creating navigation mesh for NPCs. Do they have a mesh that hey, they spawn and then this is their mesh right here? I don't know enough about how they work. Sergeant Lobster 07 says, I think it's time for CIG to admit they just can't make NPCs work as intended and move on to something else. I don't think that's going to happen at all, especially considering we are at static server meshing, not dynamic. It's now that we have static server meshing and soon dynamic server meshing, you have to remember that these things, them not working with just regular servers, single servers, was one thing. Okay, now that it is a less of a constraint of a single server, things are a whole lot better. Are they perfect? No, but they're a whole lot better than they were before 4.0 and static server meshing. To say that well, they didn't get it, it's not perfect 6 months after server meshing, and before dynamic server meshing, is a bit disingenuous, especially when it's a big improvement even at this point. They'll get it right. It's not 1.0. We're on our way there, but we still have to get to dynamic server meshing, and they have to work on syncing all these things up. And there's more services and stuff. It's just it's not a matter of if, or when, or sorry, it's not a matter of if, it's when. So it's the way it is. Everything gets better over time. It's better than it was last year. It's last year was better than it was 2 years before that. The fact that NPCs actually react to me on a fairly regular basis and react appropriately more often than not is a big change. And so I think it's here I'm going to pick up this goalpost and move it way down here now that static server meshing is in. Well, it should have just automatically worked perfectly with static server meshing added in. It's like, no, a whole bunch of shit changed. And they're working on it, and things are getting better. Fixes were made to perception, audio propagation, combat investigation, and grenades. For the latter, updates were made to the targeting cooldown timer and collision checks when throwing grenades, while a fix was made to ensure that dropped grenades always explode. I have honestly not seen an NPC drop a grenade. Like if you shoot them when they're about to throw and they drop it. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'll have to try and time it. Be like, oh, wait for it. He's reaching for a grenade now. Because that's always a fun thing that you see, when playing shooters. But like, it's certainly not something I can't say that I've seen in an online like MMO type game. Like obviously, single player shooters and everything. Do you feel that you see genuine performance improvements at locations with active NPCs when the shard server population is at its maximum? And that's the hard thing, is it's server dependent. So the shard could be at the maximum, but the population could be more concentrated on a server or servers that you're not on. So I could be on a server in Stanton that could have like 24 people. It's rarely evenly distributed, and that's also part of the problem. Is you rarely see it, in a full shard, and we wouldn't really know unless you had somebody in each server tracking it, in each server region tracking it, but you never see perfect and absolute dispersion. So that's that's part of the issue is, and why it's so unreliable is, you may have a full shard, which is what CIG is generally always going for, and that's how their matchmaking works, is to try and keep shards relatively full, because otherwise if they had empty shards, if they have a spun up shard with 100 players across 10 servers, that's a lot of wasted money for them. But you can have a shard that's up and people are concentrating, depending on where the gameplay is and what the flavor of the day is, people are going to be more concentrated on certain servers within the shard. And so the performance is going to differentiate a lot. Now with dynamic server meshing, that's part of that fix, is to allow for the performance per server to never get or avoid ever getting above a certain point. So the amount of entities and locations and NPCs and all that weighs down a server that a server is having to simulate within a shard will always be within a certain performance envelope, versus right now they're static. And so they can exceed that performance envelope, whereas others will be well below it, just based off of where players are. And so that's part of the issue right now is, sometimes you'll be on a server where the NPCs are absolutely dialed because there's 12 people on that one, and the one, the next planetary system over has 200 players on it, and it's chugging. And you have to remember that the replication layer is transmitting all this information to us via the servers. But if a server is overloaded, it can only send so much information, per tick, per cycle. So that's where you get the desync. Yeah, and that seems probably about right. 50 to 60 players. But I think a lot of that is going to change and fluctuate a lot with dynamic server meshing, partly because they will be able to increase NPC populations, and they're also aiming to add a lot more locations to essentially the entity zones, the planets and space and everything. So what, how much game space a server will handle is going to fluctuate a lot with dynamic server meshing, because a 50 to 60 player server right now could have a much lower entity count than a 50 to 60 player server in dynamic server meshing, simply because of or not just entity count, but entities, NPCs, and their behaviors and what they're tracking. Simply because they go for a higher density to make the universe the whole living, breathing universe thing. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about when they think about dynamic server meshing. They think about more players, and it's not just more players; it's more NPCs. The verse is very empty right now when it comes to NPC populations. They are tied to locations, and there aren't very many of them. Their behaviors are even now still limited. They're a lot more, more than they used to be. Now that the AI teams aren't so constrained, but there's going to be a new norm, a new baseline that gets established once they reach dynamic server meshing, and then there's going to be a lot of optimization and tweaking after that. So AI game intelligence development team. The game intelligence development team started the month with meetings relating to StarScript, Mission System 2.0. There we go. The commentator mode, the density profiler, entity scripting, mannequin, and the animation system. Mannequin. What is that? Progress was also made on the prototype for Mission System V2. Implementation of the outline header and dashboard began. The visuals are evolving and adapting gradually to the limitations of Qt programming. As part of this, more icons were created to represent each mission component. Additionally, the team continued to fix small bugs and work on some of the features requested by the game designers to improve StarScript. Maverick says, if we push the population to, say, 1,200 players per shard, would you think we would see NPC agent smithing make a return to maintain the population cap for servers to keep up? Well, so when we get to dynamic server meshing, the shard population is not unlimited, because eventually there's a density limitation to how many replicants you can have in a shard effectively communicating with each other. Because remember, right now we have a single shard, which is a single replication layer and 10 servers, and the player cap is set at about 6 to 700, because between the players and the servers, that's the amount of connections that a single replicant can handle in terms of throughput and bandwidth. And with dynamic server meshing, it isn't just scaling up and down servers, it's scaling up and down replicants. So you then go from a single replicant, a single replication layer, single replicant handling 2 star systems and 10 servers, to depending on the population, a single replicant could handle Microtech with 10 servers. It could, even be even smaller than that. The issue is that single replicant still has to communicate with the adjacent replicants. Does that make sense? The replicants that are handling the information adjacent to it, they still have to communicate to each other, just like the servers have to communicate to the replication layer. So there's a certain replication layer density that you can have within a shard before you just have so much information going back and forth between them that they can't handle it all in a timely manner. But that means that with, and we talked about that with the dropship segment last podcast. But the original, back in 2018, where they talked about having, 1,000 players on a planet, that's easy. That's easy for dynamic server meshing. With a shard with dynamic server meshing, and you have a single replicant handling, you could have a single replicant handling New Babbage and a server per zone in New Babbage, and then have a separate replicant handling different hemispheres of Microtech with multiple servers per replicant for each of those. You could have, for the Microtech planetary system with Microtech and its moons and the stations and the Lagrange points and all that, you could have as many replicants as we have servers in an entire shard right now, and each one of those replicants be servicing 6, 8, 10 servers. You're looking, you could easily have thousands of players within a single planetary system. Over thousands of players on a single planet. And because, to transition from one zone handled by a replicant and its servers, you have to travel essentially via QT, even the new QT, the movement of people across zones is very efficient. Movement of players and people and entities across zones. So that's what people don't realize, is that's what CIG is going for. We're not going to see larger shard counts until we see dynamic server meshing. But those shard counts aren't limited by the servers in the shard. It's limited by the fact that we only have one replication layer, and the replication layer can only handle so many connections before it gets bogged down. Anyway, sorry, tangent. But yeah, something to be excited about, because they're working hard on dynamic server meshing. They've mentioned it in this monthly report and the previous one. Benoit has said a couple times, other people have said, so we don't know what those details are, but if they're talking about it, they're working on it and they're making progress. AI Tech. Throughout June, the AI Tech team provided bug fixes and support for the Alpha 4.2 release, including optimizing how navigation mesh regeneration accounts for navigation links. So that's a big deal. Navigation links being the things that connect navigation meshes from one zone to another. No worries, Maverick. I am always happy to go on a tangent about server meshing, or about a lot of things. But if you've got questions, I always ask them. I don't mind going on tangents. It doesn't. There's no such thing as derailing this podcast, because that's what this is about. It's about sharing information and having better understanding within the community. But yeah, navigation mesh regeneration accounts for navigation links. So if a navigation mesh ties into a navigation link, so the navigation links are what allow NPCs in the future to walk around an area and then use something to transit to another area, an elevator, a door, stairs, a ladder, even a tram, eventually ships. So if you remember, when we got the NPC dropships reinforcements, where they come in on a Cuddy Black and hop out, part of the issue was the navigation link system, and so it was having a hard time establishing a navigation link with the navigation mesh. So the NPCs didn't know that they had landed and could walk out the door, and so that's why they just stood there, because the game was broken and didn't tell them that there was ground to walk on outside the Cutlass Black. And so they worked initially, and then something broke it, and then they weren't working anymore, and now they don't do anything. So that's part of what this is working towards, is getting that to come back. Not only so NPC reinforcements can be a thing, but also, and this will tie into what we'll talk about with rescue missions, but so NPCs can leave on a ship or vehicle. Yeah, the dropships were a lot of fun, and it was immersive, and it's a very needed thing for gameplay. And for missions, and for scaling up the difficulty of things. Since last year, the island calculation, a way to determine which areas are reachable from the perspective of an NPC, was split into chunks for use by the planetary nav mesh. Related bugs were investigated that caused some NPCs to not be able to find a path from an individual zone to planetary terrain. From an individual zone to planetary terrain. Yeah, so if they are in a building, they are on a platform, again, on a ship. Because if you remember, NPCs can walk around in buildings and everything. It's the issue has been getting them walking around on the planet's surface. Well, now we have them walking around on the planet's surface, but we need to be able to get them to move back and forth between the two. An entity, a zone like that to the terrain. So even in and out of buildings. So even if the building is like an outpost in Pyro, making sure they can reliably just walk out the door onto the same surface. That's a challenging thing. Northern Trooper says, just binge watch The Pit. 1, take your tissue box. The Pit. 1, take your tissue box. 2, I hope to God that the trauma medical gameplay reflects that of the stress shown in The Pit. I don't know if the medical gameplay will ever get that stressful, but that's something I want to talk about in the rescue missions. Is it's the combination of the medicine, but also the environment and the operational challenges that make the prospect for rescue missions in the search and rescue missions in the game really interesting. And the medical gameplay has a long ways to go, and a lot of that is just the UI and the AFX and VFX, because that's a lot of what my job is unconscious patients where the IV pump and the ventilator and the monitor are all screaming at me, and there's red lights flashing because things are going wrong, and I need to fix them, and I have to know which buttons to push to fix it, and pushing this button will improve this part, but will make this part worse. So then I have to do this, and it's a chain thing. So that part's stressful. Doing that in turbulence with the background noise, is of the aircraft, it's summer, so the AC hasn't kicked on, and it's still 100 degrees in the aircraft. All that. I'd be happy with the medical gameplay like the trauma rescue teams in Cyberpunk 2077. I just want trauma teams from Cyberpunk Cyberpunk. I want NPC trauma teams. God's sakes, we need those. It's planned. It's part of what they want. But again, that's NPC populations. That's dynamic server meshing. It's the same as having NPC law enforcement responding to you when you get attacked. In Stanton. Not going to have that until then. Not going to have NPCs coming to rescue you when you're downed until then. But yeah. They also massively optimized the searching of nav mesh around a point. AI tech converted the internal data structure that points at exclusion volumes or cost modifiers into AABB tree. AABB tree. I'm tree. To quickly access and exclude unnecessary elements from the queries. They then increased the radius used by NPCs to generate nav mesh on planets to provide a better Valacar fight experience. See, I wonder if that is part of what they're doing to improve the animations. Because we were just kind of talking about that. For example, each variant of the creature needs to be able to move large distances around the world, with the recent amends providing improved generation granularity. I don't know. I don't know if that's tied in the animations or how that will work. A way to mark up brushes, geometries that aren't entities, was implemented to ensure they aren't walkable for NPCs. This was necessary to avoid the use of unnecessary navigation exclusion volumes when artists want to prevent NPCs from walking over specific objects. So they don't want NPCs just randomly, doing a 5-foot step over a box or something. Or rocks or whatever. Ongoing work continued to update 3D pathfinding to use the new voxelizer approach. Alongside this, the team now has full support for quantum boosting energy usage to efficiently use speeds when flying in space. Huh. Okay, so this is when they talk about 3D pathfinding using the new voxelizer approach. They talked about the ships having 3D pathfinding, so flying around in space, and how they generate their navigation and movements. But it also applies to NPCs EVAing in space and how they'll move around. Eventually, this tech will be used to have NPCs doing EVA. In space and also no-G environments. Alongside this, the team is now full support for quantum boosting energy usage to efficiently use speeds when flying in space. So apparently they'll be able to not only this isn't just for SCM flight, but they will be able to have ships that can quantum boost and utilize that behavior. I don't know. That's how I'm reading it. I'm not sure how that'll work or what they have planned for that. Pardon me. For StarScript, the export as image functionality now supports exporting multiple graphs at the same time. Numerous other features progressed that will eventually be used directly in StarScript 2. In other work, the ability for NPCs to react to radar pings was added. So this is part of the work for the FPS radar and scanning, which has been ongoing with the new vehicle radar and scanning system. They are a holistic system. It's another one-ring system. So NPC ships will react to you doing your scan wave, your radar ping, but also NPCs on the ground have the behavior to react, detect and react to your radar pings. Yeah, NPCs ping me now. Now they will either consider a ping as a disturbance to investigate or an active event to bring them into combat. Finally, for AI tech, fixes for NPCs driving vehicles were added, which is a feature the team hoped to add to the PU at some point. You have to remember that some of this stuff is for Squadron, some is for the PU, some is for both. And they don't differentiate anymore. NPCs driving vehicles, they're working on that for Squadron, obviously, but they say they'll eventually be bringing in the PU. But obviously, if they're working on radar and scanning, that's one of the things that they want to be having coming to tech preview soon. If they have that in, they want that to NPCs to be able to react to that when once it comes into game. So animation, what do we think? Is this the RSI Meteor, probably, or do you think it's the Perseus? I thought the Perseus had the big airlock, so I think maybe this is the Meteor. I don't know. Unless they changed the concept for the Perseus to have the smaller airlock. Animation spent the month supporting the irradiated Valacar alongside another new creature for later this year. Perseus has a recessed airlock. Yeah, but remember if you remember the concept art, the Perseus airlock was the sort of hexagonal, right? Like the one we have on the Idris, the Polaris. That's what was in the concept art. So which one does it have? I just want these to actually work, to dock with things. So another new creature later this year. Ooh, I wonder which one it's going to be. They also progressed with animations for pre-combat and social area usables that will promote more stealth gameplay opportunities against NPCs. That's something later on this year. That's something with later on this year and more likely next year, I think. Because remember that I think that's going to have to come in with more stuff related to armor and suits. Facial animation supported multiple releases throughout June. They began by finalizing the content required for Alpha 4.2.1, including new lines for Stows, Walton, and the additional NPCs in the Defend location missions. They then worked alongside the narrative and mocap teams to capture new mission giver content for Alpha 4.3 and 4.3.1. The team are currently processing the recorded content as the release dates approach. And so that's something, this is actually part of what spurred me to do this Scanner Anomaly that we're going to talk about on rescue missions, is the narrative and mocap teams doing all this mission giver content. We got the missions with Gilly and getting the comms calls and how those were triggered. And when I was getting those and doing those missions, I was like, man, this would be really cool to use this to have as like a dispatcher for your rescue missions and interacting with them throughout the mission as you do different things and essentially hit different checkpoints based off what you do. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about when we get into the rescue missions, because I think that's what will really help with the immersion, but also keeping the player informed about what they need to do and what's coming, as well as building tension. Art ships. So in the UK, the Anvil Paladin continued through Greybox, with additional artists being moved onto it as their other tasks were completed to help prepare for its July gate review. So July, it sounds like they're trying to get through Greybox in July and then on to final art. Pre-production began on the Gatak Raelin, which will continue between other tasks ahead of the ship officially entering production later this year. Those owners will be happy. Some of the team moved on to the Drake Ironclad, with some areas receiving layout alterations to improve traversal, alongside refinement to the modular Drake kit. Good to see that there's improvements to that kit. I'm excited to hear about how that will benefit the Drake Kraken. Work progressed on 5 unannounced vehicles. 2 completed their white box phase and are now well into gray box, with focus on details around the hull. Another is in the final stages of production and is receiving the finishing touches and bug fixes ahead of its release. I think that's the Meteor. Pardon me. Another vehicle from a prominent manufacturer entered production and is currently approaching its white box review. A new variant also entered pre-production with the team, which the team states may have the record for the fastest vehicle through the production pipeline. I hope once it gets through the pipeline that they tell us that that was the one, and maybe explain why, if it's not immediately obvious. This is the other reason I wanted to talk about rescue missions and sort of concept these is because in North America, the RSI Apollo Medevac and Triage reached the Lot 0 phase. So they are into final art. Lot 0. We probably have a few months left. We don't know when they'll release. Because with ships releasing every month instead of every quarter, we don't know. Maybe it's an IAE thing, maybe it's sooner, maybe it's later. But it reached the Lot 0 phase, so that's the level of detail at 0, at as close as you can get. With the devs ensuring the modular medical bays swap out and behave as expected. So modularity, the next ship with essentially modularity post Retaliator. But that's the thing, and that's one of my chief concerns, is that they put the Apollo into production with having a tier 1 bed, and they put a tier 1 bed in the Idris, which I find disappointing. Yeah, it's too popular for a monthly drop. I mean, I assume it'll be an event-related ship or something, but it's considering they haven't talked about anything for medical gameplay, I have concerns. Especially because they added they put in the first tier 1 bed in a player ownable ship in the Idris, and it doesn't do anything other than just act like the tier 1 beds we already have. And so no changes to medical gameplay with the addition of a tier 1 bed. And so if they add our first hospital ship, because right now we have ambulances and we have ships that have med bays that aren't dedicated to hospital ships, but this is an actual clinic with modularity meant to be able to hold size 3, size 2, size 1 beds. It's its whole purpose. And if they add that without any additions or changes to medical gameplay, I'll be upset. Now, this is me theory crafting. I think that this is going to come with engineering. That's part of their goal, is to launch it with engineering later this year. Because engineering is resource network. Resource network means the consumption of resources. Well, we know that the med beds have little drawers that you potentially put resources into in order to consume resources, to do healing, to be used for regeneration, to be used for stabilization, for symptom treatment. And so, ostensibly, you would need resource network to come into game as part of engineering for the med bed for additional medical gameplay with med beds. I've never been on a hospital ship IRL. I have heard it is reverse LHD demographics. Oh, with lots of female personnel and a lot fewer male. I don't know. I mean, we've got the 2 Mercy ships, and so I've never been anywhere near them. But I mean, that's how hospitals are. Nursing is still a predominantly female profession. But yeah. So that's my theory with the medevac and the triage. That's my hope. But because they are in production and well into production, that's another reason I wanted to talk about rescue missions. Following the release of the Asperia Prowler utility, the team tackled some bugs with fixes due to land in Alpha 4.2.1. The RSI Perseus approached its gray box gate review As such, a lot of work was done to prepare anything that animates, such as the torpedo launches for the downstream teams. So a gray box review, it still has to go through final art. Final art on a ship like that will take a bit of time. But because it's RSI, some of that surface work and lighting and everything like that should go a little faster than, or should go faster than previously. Lastly, 4 ships, the Drake Kraken entered pre-production, with the team identifying areas from the original concept that need further attention to bring to modern standards. Full production will begin later this year. I hope that they give us an update on what sort of changes from original concept they are intending to make after they get done with pre-production. Community. June began with a celebration of diversity and culture as the team launched Show Us Your Colors 2025. This was followed by support for Alien Week 2955, which included a Q&A for the Asperia Prowler utility and the Wicklow's 9 Tastes contest, where players embraced brand new culinary traditions through imaginative alien-inspired dishes. Be curious to know how much bigger the ship will get. I don't think the dimensions will change all that much. It was concepted late enough that I don't think we're going to see huge changes in the size. They did say a few years ago that the size of the cargo bay would change just due to the changes in the cargo metrics since then, but that it wouldn't it wouldn't significantly impact the size of the ship. So we shall see. I still have one of buybacks. I don't know if I'll buy it back or not. I'm pretty excited about the Ironclad because I melted my Kraken to get the 2 Ironclads. Those are more my speed. But it's another capital ship, a massive ship, and people have been waiting for it since 2018. So just seeing it go into production is an exciting thing, especially with how much Drake kit they will have by the time it goes into production. That's exciting. I wish that they would update us on, or I hope that they'll update us on the speed in order to shut some people up and be like, hey, the Perseus took this long. The Ironclad took this long. The Kraken took this long. That would be really good to hear. The team also supported the launch of Alpha 4.2, publishing a patch watch to spotlight important updates not covered on the roadmap, along with a catch-all post. June also marked International Bar Citizen Weekend, where the team celebrated with the community across Frankfurt, Montreal, Austin, and Manchester. Attendees received this year's exclusive Bar Citizen gift, the holographic Vandal Skull. This exclusive in-game gift will be available at every Bar Citizen World Tour stop later this year. A huge thank you to everyone who joined us. Meeting so many passionate and creative members in person was truly inspiring. Your stories and support continue to drive us forward, community team. I guess you can buy the Kraken back and don't have to win an F5 war. Yep, I got mine in Wave 5 during the original concept, I think. And I think it's because I was at CitizenCon 2948. I don't remember. Yeah. Yeah, that, and the Iron Chad is a cool ship. And the other thing that's really exciting about the Iron Chad, and I'm hoping it comes to be, is that the Iron Chad, the command module is detachable, and I'm hoping that it detaching will be a feature in game when it releases, and that the caterpillars will do that as well when that time comes. That is a long-awaited, I don't own a caterpillar, never have, but it's a long-awaited thing that I've wanted to see, that I think is super cool. Not going to get one of those Bar Citizen events down here in New Zealand anytime soon, I think. Yeah, you're a little ways away. I don't know, maybe. There's a, you're right next to Australia. There's a lot of, There's a lot of y'all down there, that's for sure. Yeah, that's the thing is, like, wouldn't it be cool if the two command pods were interchangeable? I don't think they've done a CIG or a bar citizen that CIG has attended in Australia. I don't know. Bar Citizen World Tour then made stops in Lyon, Toronto, and Copenhagen. As the team continued to meet and engage with local communities around the globe. The team also collected and reviewed CitizenCon Direct Watch Party submissions from those planning to host a watch party on October 11th. More details will be shared soon as the list is finalized. Evergreen tasks continued, including This Week in Star Citizen, the Roadmap update and Roundup, the Arena Commander schedule update, and collating several mountains of feedback and ensuring they were delivered to appropriate developers. The team also completed tasks to prepare for the Foundation Festival and Ship Showdown, both set to begin in July. Alongside ongoing work for CitizenCon Direct this October. In addition, submissions were collected for the Org Spotlight Comlink, which highlights player organizations during Foundation Festival. Now on to core gameplay, and look how short it is. It's usually like 3 times this long. Is it really that much longer to get to New Zealand after getting to Australia? Oh my gosh. It looks so close on the map. It's only like an inch away. With the new Stormbreaker content, the core gameplay teams added several updates to radiation, hazard areas, and damage over time handling. New IFCS logic was also added for storm clouds. Very cool. Love the new weather. Finally got to see that the other night. It's cool. Oh man, can't wait to see more of that. And I know that there were some people, or not some people, maybe it was certain ships, I think it was, that had issues with the ground turbulence. I like it. I think it's great, but I've only experienced it in the Valkyrie, the Asgard, the Raft, and the F7A and the F7A Mark II. Most of the teams contributed to the Apex Valkar encounter, including its appearance and how it interacts with players. The teams were also involved in the new Argo Atlas ICTY, including enabling freight elevators to support the various power suit variants. Please, and that worked great for me, but please give us a tab on the freight elevators for ground vehicles, so that way I don't have to try and find it, because currently it's under the tab of all the things that are like hangar flare, and so I had to scroll through to find it in there, and that was a pain after the first time I pulled it up. But I hope that they are working on making the rest of the ground vehicles able to do it, because that can't come soon enough. The recently added points of interest uncovered several unexpected issues during internal playtests and the PTU, though the teams worked hard to resolve them for release. One major challenge was managing the new location's population and corpse control without causing a significant impact on performance. Yeah, because with the trams and having respawn there, there are definitely some design issues with the new locations. They look cool, but the flow of them has something to be desired. And dumbing down, or not dumbing down, but neutering regen cannot come soon enough. God, I hate the quick respawn bullshit. Several freight elevator fixes were made across multiple missions, while improvements and bug fixes were made for radiation. Mission design. So last month, Mission Design worked to close out the Stormbreaker sandbox activity for release. For the upcoming Alpha 4.2.1 patch, they expanded the Infiltrate and Defend suite to only use Foxwell as the mission giver and expanded its location pool. They also fixed the Recover Cargo archetype and created an FPS version. I want to play those. Because they hadn't been working for me last time I tried them, and having an FPS version, are those coming? And they're not on the. They didn't mention it in the roadmap. Is that just something that will be? I would think that if they created an FPS version, that would be on the roadmap, but maybe that's something that'll be in a patch watch. Elsewhere, the team are looking to expand the ship battles mission suite with a new escort-based archetype. For this, players will either escort a ship to a hangar or from a hangar to a safe range where it can quantum jump. Work then continued on content for upcoming patches, including moving generic contracts over to guilds and factions, which is needed for Reputation version 2. Finally, for mission design, the devs are investigating an issue with mission generation where it appears that there are not enough contracts for everyone, which is likely caused by server meshing. Armistice escort, easy money. Narrative. For following Alpha 4.2's release, the narrative team focused on the next 2 upcoming patches, which will feature a variety of new missions. This included creating new contracts, mission provider dialogue, and environmental story detail for a narrative-rich gameplay location. The team held a performance capture session to record mission dialogue and numerous audio logs to be discovered by players. Additionally, the team supported the mission designers in adding several new combat contracts along with a refactor for several older missions. Longer term, narrative have been solidifying the next major story arc. As the mission content comes more into focus, the team are striving to ensure that the stories the players will experience align closely with the gameplay objectives. Part of this new story will introduce a unique hostile faction. Ooh, that's interesting. I'm intrigued. In support of Alien Week, Narrative released a handful of new and expanded Galactopedia articles that focus on the strange fauna and life forms found in the PU. I missed the Galactopedia updates. I really missed those. I'm glad that Narrative is so busy with this content-rich year, but I miss doing lore equals gameplay. I might have to start doing that just off of like specific things related to the lore that are part of gameplay or eventual gameplay. Online technology. Stop moving. The online services team continued to work on the item imprint system. Design aspects are being discussed. Technical documentation is being written, and service development began. I don't know what item imprint is. I'm not sure. The team also began preliminary discussions for the upcoming instancing service in collaboration with other teams. So, and they'll talk more about this with dynamic server meshing at the very end. But the instancing we have is limited by the by static server meshing. It has limitations. We can only have so many instances on a server because they do take up server bandwidth, server performance, and so there's going to be a service that manages all the instances and manages them, controls them as part of dynamic server meshing, so that way they can scale up instancing as needed. They're currently defining the objectives and high-level technical details to estimate and plan the work properly. Because obviously there's going to be a lot of things that are instance hangars, instance player housing, more and more instance locations, like they talked about the sewers and art core, which is not just going to be an art core thing, but the underground for cities everywhere. Item imprinting must be related to insurance. I think it's item imprinting because it's on under online technology. I think it's related to more the inventory system, not the player facing side, but the inventory on the back end and like long term persistence. But I'm not sure. Let's see. They haven't. This is the second time they've mentioned it, but they haven't talked about it in detail. So like, it's hard to know what that means. I mean, it could be related to ownership and item recovery. In that instance, in that items imprint on a player in order for recovery, but I think it's when they say imprint, they mean like in terms of persistence data to allow for state recovery to work better for items and entities, so that way when things are stowed and unstowed as things despawn. The long-term persistence needs a lot of work. Item recovery needs a lot of work. It's one of those things where I think they need to get to the end for the development of dynamic server meshing before those things become much more robust. Like obviously they're developing the services that will tie into that, but as everything gets developed to tie into it, we're going to still experience bugs as they develop those services that, hey, take this old one that we have that wasn't, or was hodgepodge to work with server meshing. Here's the new one meant to work with dynamic server meshing. We get it in game and then we, test it and break it and bug fix it and optimize it. So it's gonna be a little while yet, but again, it's always progress. It's better than it was the year before. The year before is better than it was 2 years before that. But this is the road to 1.0. The team also worked on various improvements and bug fixes to provide a better experience for players. Furthermore, the team discussed inventory ID enforcement and the inventory API. The idea of this project is to ensure that the inventory API only accepts calls that affect a specific inventory ID. This would set up the foundation for the upcoming entity graph global database sharding. So this is creating... They can't have a single entity graph global database with every shard talking to it. But it all needs to be unified between the different between the different shards. So this is making it so we have an entity graph experience that allows for dynamic server meshing to constantly stay in connection with the entity graph and for the same information to be shared between all the shards across the globe as needed, if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm probably not explaining that very well. The Live Tools team reworked the filtering and sorting functionality of the moderation tool, significantly enhancing the overall user experience. They also addressed technical debt and introduced quality of life improvements, such as quick access to various tools linked directly to game instances. In parallel, testing began for the new MTL development infrastructure, which offloads computational load from individual development machines, making day-to-day work smoother and more efficient. Additionally, improvements continued for the crash handler, making it more reliable and less prone to errors. The network team focused on bug fixing and stability updates. Steady progress is currently being made toward dynamic server meshing, which is also crucial for the successful implementation of instancing. We have instancing, and and this is a theory, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think a lot of the issues that we have with freight elevators are because of instanced hangars. And I think that to further improve freight elevators, they can only improve to a certain point while instancing is in its current iteration. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think that's part of the limitations and why we still have so many errors and problems with freight elevators. Is because of their in an instance location, or at least the ones in hangars. R&D. Gas cloud rendering was further refined based on the improvements implemented in March. To get additional detail and improved distance read, support for an extra erosion layer was added. Controls were also added to boost intermediate cloud density during the shaping and erosion process to prevent clouds from thinning out too much. The goal is to preserve the overall shape of the original VDB as much as possible, with details added at the cloud interface. The previous density blending step was replaced by a new merging step that combines shaped and original VDB density. This fixes visual artifacts caused by the blending step and helps to preserve details. Lastly, edge albedo control was made aware of the cloud's density. Oops, out of the way. The cloud's density environment to limit darkening to shape regions without the presence of density coming from the original VDB. All improvements were made available to both the PU and Squadron 42. A lot of work going on in clouds. The clouds are already looking great. They're going to continue to look even better and better, but I think a lot of this work is in advance of additional dynamic weather changes. They want to have clouds really performant and working well if they're going to be constantly changing as part of dynamic weather, and changing more than we already have. Elsewhere, the performance of planet cloud rendering for cameras in orbit was increased. Also, like when we're flying around. Also, night sky rendering was improved. Previously, it incorrectly included MIE, scattering with regards to the fully occluded sun, and produced undesired fake halos, especially when looking at the night sky from orbit. This is now fixed. I'd love to see an in-game hurricane over a CZ. Imagine flying your dropship into that. Oh God. But yeah, I mean, like gale force winds. Can you imagine flying any ship, through like insane weather like that? And imagine missions where you have to, like, that's it. That's the only option, and everybody's just holding on to their seats and praying you make it. I mean, that's, the kind of high stakes content that would be insane to have and is very much within the remit of CIG with their weather system that they're developing and the missions. To be able to say, hey, here's the mission, you don't have to accept it, but, we'll pay you this much money, and like it'd be a big rep payout and blah, blah, blah to go and rescue these people or, whatever. SCODST time, guys and gals. See, and Mishal 19K, have you read or listened to the Helldivers books? Has nothing, no relation to Helldivers, the video game. It's a phenomenal series. But in Helldivers, they're like, it's a post-apocalyptic Earth, and everybody lives in these airships above an irradiated landscape. And the Helldivers, essentially free fall, a halo jump from these airships down to the surface to collect supplies and tech, and then but like the world is blanketed by horrific storms with horrific winds and lightning. So helldivers are constantly trying to avoid lightning because they get just absolutely fried as they jump through the lightning storms and cooked alive. And so I'm like, oh boy. So not only do you have to deal with like high winds and visibility, severe turbulence, but lightning strikes affecting your ship. Let's see. Furthermore, help was provided to fix the reflection of atmosphere content on water surfaces that was too dark under some conditions. The VFX code and art teams worked on several things for Alpha 4.2. For example, the irradiated Valakar received bespoke animations and new irradiated VFX, while the weather VFX was refined and increased to make the event more tense. The Argo Atlas ICTI also received new impact and surface effects. And that is it for the June monthly report for Star Citizen and Squadron 42, technically. Let's go ahead and switch screens real quick. Fryer systems forced to land. That's we don't fuck around with lightning in aviation, and I'm glad that they aren't futurizing that for Star Citizen. You've got shields, blah blah blah. Why does lightning matter? It's the 30th century. No, that's boring. If you're not under threat by weather conditions, it just makes flight really boring and super just arcadey. Thanks, Danger Hobo. Yep, I read all the long ones. Give me just a minute for a quick intermission. I'm gonna go take a quick bathroom break. I'll be right back, and then we will get into the Scanner Anomaly for this evening about rescue missions. 1 second.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yup!
Oh, hey, Victoria. Thank you so much for renewing your sub. Lucky 13, happy belated 4th Sarge. What up, chat? Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Happy Independence Day. Official chair stream, yeah. My new to me Herman Miller. Oh man, it's been great. It's been really good to me. It's called Elmo's Fire, and I think it's not a big deal IRL. Lightning does not play well with aircraft. No, bad thing. Yeah, we avoid, if there is lightning in the sky, we avoid it at all costs. I don't like, bigger planes are much more resistant or resilient to it, bigger aircraft. But what I fly in, helicopters and small passenger aircraft, we don't do lightning. Nope, that's an absolute no-go for us. I know bigger planes have much more ability to dissipate a lightning strike, but I know that lightning can still hurt them. All right, let's go ahead and switch back to the other window, and we'll get started with tonight's Scanner Anomaly. So, if you guys recall, way back when, 4 years ago, literally 4 years ago, CIG started work on rescue transport missions. And I'll read the description for this. Taking advantage of AI follow behaviors to create missions where players transport customers from one location to another, along with prototype missions where players must rescue imperiled clients from dangerous situations and escort them to safety. Chat was so young 4 years ago. Yeah. So obviously, and we talked about this just a little while ago when we were reading the monthly report, taking advantage of AI follow behaviors to create missions where players must transport customers from one location to another. So the 4 years ago, they're still trying to get this to work right, and with the AI tech, but they wanted to have these missions in so that way you could fly down somewhere and you could go and find an AI and tell them to follow you, and the AI would follow you back and get on your ship and take a seat, and you'd be able to take them somewhere and land, and they'd get off your ship. Well, obviously, due to the breaking and no longer working of the NPC dropship reinforcements, that wouldn't work. If the NPCs can't walk off a ship onto a navigation mesh because of the navigation link system, they wouldn't be able to walk onto that same ship from that navigation mesh. They wouldn't be able to detect that there's a ramp that they can walk on and then see that usable, which is a seat. And so that's part of why these missions didn't go any farther, is they were trying, like, these behaviors are in, they work for an NPC to use a chair to detect a chair. But the navigation linking system is still in development because it needs to be a holistic system rather than having, okay, this is the system that allows them to go from a navigation mesh to go onto a ship and then walk around and navigate a ship and find a usable, like sit on a chair. And this is the one that allows them to walk through a door out onto a surface. And this is the one that allows them to get on a tram at one location, then get off at another tram in a city. It needs to be a holistic system that works for any instance where the NPC has to pathfind as part of their behavior from one location to another via some sort of transition. I was just the troop in the back of every helo. They always stress that you do not want to become the grounding connection. Yeah, you don't want to be the grounding connection for anything. Nope, that's a bad thing. But the amount of energy transmitted by a lightning strike to an aircraft, it's not so much about you, it's about the aircraft systems and them continuing to do what they're supposed to do. And there's only so much you can do to harden against that much voltage, amperage, I don't know, within a small aircraft. So that's part of the reason that the rescue transport missions didn't go anywhere, because they say rescue when rescue, but also transport missions. It's part of the reason that we need. If you go into the hangars right now you can see that there's a personnel entrance within the hangar. It's already set up with a door and everything for you to be able to take a personnel transport mission, and you take the mission and you call up the appropriate ship, and you'd have to do something to signal the NPCs to come walking out of that personnel transport door, and then walk over to your ship and then get on board and take a seat. But they have to have that working for these missions to work. Are we getting reworked to hangars for modularity? For modularity for the hangars to add hangar modules, or are you talking about ship modularity? What do you mean? Back when I don't know if it's a rework to the hangars or what, because like right now, if you use your tractor beam, you can actually lock onto the freight elevator. It's its own entity within the hangar. It's a physicalized thing, and so for like right now, I don't know how they're going to make that work so that way you can customize your hangars. Because I think what they said is they didn't want to change the size of the hangars. It allowed you to make them bigger and everything like that, but to use some of those spaces and customize them to your own ends. And so if they can add the freight elevator and add that as an entity, they can do that for the different modules that they'd want to add, as well as to make it an entity that allows for NPCs to come and go from the personnel space. But I think it's more going to be you have a large space here, a medium space here, a small space here, blah, blah, blah. And you can say, I want this module here, this module here. But I don't think you're going to be able to, they did say that you're not going to have the hangar sizes scale. But they do say, so along with prototype missions where a player must rescue imperiled clients from dangerous situations and escort them to safety. Now that's those are some weasel words. That's very nebulous. But that does give you an idea of what their intent is. Imperiled clients. Now it doesn't say anything about rescue or medical. It just says that they are imperiled. So they are trapped behind a locked door or a broken door in a crashed ship. They are down in a hole in a cave somewhere. They are, on the other side of a corridor in a building, and the building's on fire. They are under attack, and you have to go and kill the bad guys and then bring them on your ship and then take them back to wherever they want to go. And then they get off and mission complete. The delivery of the person satisfies the mission just like delivering of cargo in a freight elevator. So that's kind of what they're going for with the rescue missions. But part of the reason that they didn't continue to work on this is because they had more work to do on the tech, and we talked about that, but also because with the features that they are developing right now, there's a lot more that they can do with these missions in order to make them more engaging for players and to make them a lot more interesting. And so if you think about that from one perspective is the like I talked about earlier, the ghillie missions. The ghillie missions are, you've got multiple phases. Things get triggered by you doing certain things or doing certain tasks. And you have interaction with ghillie. Ghillie updates you throughout the mission. Pardon me. As you go with more information, more context to help you with the next phase of the mission. And I think that's sort of like the baseline for their missions going forward, even their sort of generic missions going forward, is they want things to utilize this modular mission system, to utilize comms calls and voice acting and stuff as much as possible to immerse you, but also to provide information, to provide context, to help with the flow of the mission, but also to deliver tension. To help you feel engaged. And so that's a big part of what could make a search and rescue mission really exciting, is interacting with a dispatcher as you progress through these missions. So let's go ahead. Well, I'm going to pause the music for a second so we can... If you remember at CitizenCon last year, the Academy of Science Guild progression, you have these different professions within it. You've got hunters, explorer, different mission types within these professions. So search and rescue, rescue person, and firefighting. So two different mission types within search and rescue. Firefighting and rescue person. And so those things are not necessarily mutually exclusive either. You could have firefighting involved in the rescue of a person. And so we'll talk about that. But let's listen.
For those who dream of exploring, I'm sure we have a couple here. We had the Academy of Sciences that was brought up yesterday in the social presentation, if you saw that. This is a science guild that will include factions like the Imperial Cartography Center, who will task you with a variety of missions to better understand our universe, such as sending you into a nebula to do deep scans, or finally seeing what's at the bottom of that planetary canyon. We're going to have a new faction called High Point Wilderness Specialists, who will offer missions associated with the various fauna that we're starting to get into the game, from population control missions to harvesting specific resources for research.
And so they don't specifically talk about the organization Rapid Response, but that's one of the organizations that you're going to be able to work for. And obviously, there's going to be a whole lot more later on. But this is just for 1.0. This is just for the first 5 systems. And so let's talk about Rapid Response. This is a Lore Makers Community Questions. I forget when this one was. It's within the last couple of years because that's how long they've been doing these. Someone asked, what's life like in the emergency medicine profession? I'm interested in the lore behind medics and doctors of Star Citizen's verse. As we all know, the verse is a cold and dangerous world where death lurks around every corner. No, that's not true. That's not true. The verse, that's, pyro. But most of the verse is civilized and very, if you look at it from modern perspective, almost Western. It's only natural for hospital staff and paramedics to be up armored or even more respected, right? No. Again, no, that's not correct. Are they paid better than we would consider today? What's the EMS system look like? And are there any prominent individuals that pioneered emergency medicine for the future? Answer. Medicine occupies a really important place in both the verse and Star Citizen's gameplay. Again, medicine, gameplay. People keep just, regen's the answer. No, this was said post-regen. So again, medical gameplay is going to be very impactful. However, aspects of this topic, like how much medics and doctors earn, have more to do with design than lore. We'll lead that side of things to the design team. As for the lore, the portfolio on the Brentworth Care Centers offers some insight here. The answer is ultimately quite simple. First, most well-equipped hospitals are in larger cities and space stations, which have safety fail-safes in place to mitigate danger. Threats to the medical infrastructure of those areas would elicit an immediate response from the governing authority. Second, seeing hospital staff in armor would likely distress patients, undermining any medical organization's efforts to comfort their patients. It's no different than the Western world right now for the vast majority of places. That said, there are places like Pyro, where you will have hospitals and clinics that aren't necessarily like this. Of course, in a place where violent crime is rampant, like Grimhex, you would probably expect that the doctors and medical staff would have more weapons and armor on display or easily accessible. Next, you also asked about paramedics and emergency medical services. That's what we're talking about, search and rescue. There are many different kinds of emergency medical service providers in the verse. Some of them work for planetary governments, others for individual hospitals, and the vast majority of such groups are private companies that provide different specialties and/or zones of operations. So that's rapid response. And so rapid response is an emergency medical service, a private emergency medical service that would provide service in either specialty service for certain events or like job site medicine, locations. You would have rapid response in pyro, but they just charge a whole lot more and and go all trauma team. And I'll explain why. But so if you are in, say, Stanton, or maybe you're in Terra, or you're in Castra, and you get injured, and you decide to have NPCs come and rescue you and take you back to a clinic or a hospital, you are most likely, depending on where you are in the system and everything, going to interact with the planetary government or hospital-based emergency medical service. Just like when we get dynamic server meshing, and you get attacked in orbit around Crusader, or Microtech, Microtech security will respond in their ships to come and do law enforcement. Well, Microtech Emergency Medical Services, if your ship is disabled and you're injured, then they come rescue you. If you are injured on a planet while you're mining or whatever, then Microtech Emergency Medical Services would come and get you and take you back to a hospital. And essentially it would be like what happens when you get downed right now, or if you just request transport because you're injured and you don't want to walk all the way back to your ship or something like that. You could get a free ambulance, not free, but an ambulance ride back to the hospital. But so that's the vast majority of such groups are private companies that provide different specialties and/or zones of operation. So rapid response may provide disaster response. They may provide supplemental. So you could get missions in the future where you're around Microtech space, and because you're a civilian, they could say, "Hey, we just got tasked with this contract from Microtech Emergency Medical Services. They don't have any available responders, and so they called us. And so here's the contract. Here's the job. You may have a response that goes directly to a corporate location, or providing medical coverage, rescue coverage for Shubin mining ships in the Air Halo, something like that. You could be in Pyro, and rapid response could be the contractor for Pyro and Nyx, and they do the remote medical search and rescue out there in order to bring you back to a UEE station, or even all the way back to a UE hospital, or provide on-site medical services, where you pay extra to get healed on site. You could be doing the contract for that organization to do those sorts of things. How does SAR response time compare to EOD response time? You know what? I don't know. I mean, overseas, we try to maintain the golden hour, which is not really a thing anymore, especially in a LISCO environment. But yeah, that's an interesting question. For example, Rajor Rescue, a Tavaran volunteer organization providing free medical service to Tavaran communities around the verse, and using their efforts to help renew a sense of cultural pride and identity amidst their diaspora. Rajor Rescue will be a faction, an organization that you can work for in the future when we have Tavaran-based locations. Emergency medical responders, and this is important too because this is alluding to gameplay. Lore equals gameplay. This is alluding to the gameplay related to rescue and medical missions. Emergency medical responders arm and armor themselves differently based on a number of factors, including their company and location of operation. Some are more specialized paramedics, but there's much more to emergency response than just medical treatment. And we're going to get into that. But so that would be part of your dispatch information. When you look at a contract, how they display the information in the Mission Manager app, and we'll talk about what that might look like and what information they might share, will determine, hey, do I want to take this mission? How much information do they have? How much of it is unknown? What information do they give me? And then how do I prepare for that mission? What mission, what equipment do I take with me? Because of what's known or what's, what known unknowns do we have? In the broader field of search and rescue, responders need the skills and gear to address and overcome many different disaster scenarios. As a result, they are far more likely to carry armor and weapons, along with multi-tools, fire extinguishers, and other more specific pieces of equipment, depending on the nature of the beacon they are responding to. And we'll get to that. And we'll read this last bit just because. Lastly, you asked about notable individuals in the field of medicine. We'd be remiss not to mention Doctors Dio Nicolas and Ted Santos, who founded Bioticor, the cutting-edge medical manufacturer responsible for the creation of Calliope medicine. Now used widely throughout the UAE, it can efficiently perform massive bioreconstructive surgery that would have previously taken a team of surgeons multiple operations. The device is so effective it's been adapted for cosmetic surgeries. Plus, as mentioned in an earlier question, there's also Dr. Ibrahim, who changed the universe with his work on regeneration. There you have it. Medicine is always evolving, with new technologies rapidly challenging our understanding of what it means to live in the verse. Got a one-eyed, one-armed buddy who took the 200K bonus. Still kicking, so that is the true bonus. Yeah, definitely. In regards to rapid response and what they might do and how this works, and most people don't know this, especially those of us gamers, because we live in places with internet, we most of us are live in civilized areas, and so we don't know that there are companies like Remote Medical International, Global Rescue, Aspen Medical, and International SOS. Now, these are just four of the big ones that I know. Well, ones that I have interacted with. I've taught classes for their offshore and remote medics. I've interacted with them when I've been deployed overseas. But these are different companies that provide different medical and rescue solutions and services in outside of civilization, beyond civilization. Hence the picture. Sometimes it's providing even clinics or even small hospitals. Let's see, where is it? Aspen Medical has actually a number of hospitals that they run in major cities of third world countries that specifically provide first world level care up to on-site, as well as receiving people before in order to coordinate for evacuation back to the Western world for expats living and working in those countries and those regions. So these companies offer their own insurance. They provide for the rescue services as well as the transport back to hospitals, in the civilized world. They provide on-site medical services. So when people, and this is the joke to me, and it really is a joke, when people say I should have a regen capable bed on my Carrack because what happens if I die out in the verse? And it's like, well, the point is to not die. That should be the consequence of you being reckless and getting yourself killed is that you regen back at a hospital, back in civilization. The point is if you are out on some exploration expedition in a far-flung environment, you would have a medical support plan. And now and in the future, because we have rapid response, which is the 30th century equivalent of RMI, of Global Rescue, Aspen Medical, International SOS, is that these are companies that provide that medical and evacuation support plan to people, to organizations, to governments, anybody and everybody who is operating away from civilization and civilized medical care. Here we go. So that's what this is all about. And so if you imagine that we have rapid response in 1.0, providing these services, in areas that are not serviced by governmental agencies. And so at 1.0, they will probably fake it. If you are a player and you call for NPCs, Aspen Medical Support Services, we get you in the clear once the check clears, 100%. Yeah, it is a pay up front. But this is who you'd be doing missions for. It is probably, in a lot of instances, it is not who would be coming to rescue you, depending on where, if you're in Terra, on Terra, if you're in, on a planet in Stanton, you'll get magicked away back to a hospital, and the bill, you will pay a bill to Microtech Emergency Services, Microtech, Brentworth Care Center, whatever. That's where the UEC will go. But if, in terms of doing contracts and missions and earning rep with the Academy of Science Guild, you will be working via rapid response. And so you would be getting, seeing these contracts come through, and they would be dispatching you and giving you information about these contracts. And those that information and the way you're dispatched would tell you about the nature of that contract. And the nature of that contract will also is what will tell you, what could tell you what gameplay you're expecting, what things you need to be able to do, what equipment you need to have, how that mission will play out, whether you need to bring some friends, what supplies you need, whether your ship is appropriate, or whether your ship using okay, I've got a Anvil C8R with a tier 3 bed. Okay, I'm not going to be able to do this mission that the client wants us to treat on site, and they expect they told us they have multiple patients with severe injuries. Well, if they've got severe injuries, you can't heal them. You can only stabilize them. So maybe you can't take that mission. Or you take a lesser payout because you stabilize and then transport them back to a clinic with a tier 2 bed for tier 2 injuries, or a hospital with a tier 1 bed for tier 1 injuries. That's what those things are going to dictate, and that's what will come in the dispatch information. Did you get any triple canopy offers or similar? It was so much money for a 25-year-old. I forget the name of the company. It was whoever bought triple canopy. I got an offer with them to be a security team medic for one of their State Department teams in Iraq in 2014. And I was about to go, and then ISIS kicked off, and they stopped. They put an immediate freeze on hirings, and then by the time they started rehiring in Iraq for that position, yeah, Constellus. I was like, nope, I'm on to bigger and better things. And I had also I had a conditional job offer for a position in 2015. I don't forget the name of the company. Oh no, it was with Global Rescue. Global Rescue had a contract with I forget the name of the organization, but the organization had Global Rescue was providing the medics to an organization that was providing the security details for a NATO subgroup, or no, it was a UN subgroup that was monitoring the ceasefire zone in and around Crimea and eastern Ukraine. And so I got a conditional job offer from that. And then shit kicked off again over there, and there was no more ceasefire, so they didn't need anyone to monitor the ceasefire zone. And after that, I was like, nope, I'm going to go be a flight medic, and have since not looked into any of that. I wish those opportunities had panned out, just because the experience would have been really cool and the money really great. Holy fuck. They're going to pay me $275K a year tax-free to be a security team medic with Constellus. And the Ukraine job was $180 a year tax-free, but for less time overseas. It was shorter deployments and less of them. So when it comes to the dispatching, and this is why what made me think about all this was Gilly. And thinking about, okay, you could have a dispatcher, doing comms calls like Gilly from Rapid Response, who you look at the contract and it gives you the the written information on the contract, and then when you accept the contract, you get a comms call from their dispatcher, like Gilly, saying, "Hey, thanks for taking this contract. We're short on pilots, we're short on medics, something like that. We really could use your help." And they give you a brief summary, a verbal summary of what you just read in order to reiterate. Because do gamers read? Do you motherfuckers read? No, you don't. You come to me and Paul and Space Tomato to read for you. That's why we read the monthly reports. But so to reiterate in a brief summary, the pertinent information, so that way people don't jump into these missions half-cocked. Yeah, Naz reads the long runs, but this is what dispatch codes look like for civilian EMS here in the United States. And so you have you get a level, a priority level based off of these alphabet codes. And sort of the nature of the call. And so you see these lines, and a alpha level response means that you would get a single BLS resource, basic life support. So an alpha level response you would, in your mission information would say, hey, you... we've got a call about a fall victim at this outpost with minor injuries, and they're requesting transport to this station for definitive medical treatment. And so you could hop in your Anvil C8R, with a tier 3 bed, and you fly out there and you bring the person hobbles into your Anvil C8R, and you You treat their symptoms with your med bed, you stabilize the injury, you fly them, and then they, now that they have their pain taken care of, they hobble a little bit less when you get to the space station. You land in a hangar, and they walk over to the hospital clinic freight elevator thing with the gurney, and they disappear. Mission complete, and you get your payout. That would be like an ALS or an alpha level response. But you could have a Bravo response would get you. Usually, this is when you don't know too much about the nature of the call. You don't have anything telling you that it's more severe, needing higher capability, but you also don't have enough information. And so you get multiple units responding just in case. And usually it gives you the ability, it says you can go lights and sirens, you can run hot. But a lot of us, don't. Simply because I'm not going to run lights and sirens if I don't have enough information to justify it. But if you have, you say, okay, it tells you that you don't know enough. You just say you've got one patient, but you don't know the nature of the patient. So you could still go in your Anvil C8R, but you may end up getting there and finding a patient with a tier 1 injury. The probability would be low because you'd be more likely to know that they have a tier 1 injury than they're severely injured, but it could still happen. So it's a risk. You would still be able to fly out there and stabilize with your tier 3 bed, but you wouldn't get the full payout because you wouldn't be able to, and remember, for these rescue missions, you're probably, and we'll talk about it later, but in the mission, it would probably dictate to you whether they want you to treat on site or treat and transport. And that will also determine what you bring. Hey, if it says treat on site and you know that you've got a Delta level call, okay, well, you need to go there with a Delta level call. They've got tier 1 injuries and they tell you multiple patients. Okay, well, you need at least one tier 1 bed if they're asking you to treat on site. Preferably more for multiple patients. So that determines whether you pick up that call. That's that progression through the system. And Charlie could say, again, that would be more like, you have a patient with a tier 2 injury, but tier 2 injuries, in the future may progress to tier 1 injuries. So you need to go. You need to go with a tier 2 bed, in order to mitigate that injury, in order to treat those symptoms. All this will depend on how medical gameplay advances. But this is just talking about the nature and severity of the patients, and this doesn't tell you anything about the nature of the call, and so. We get a lot of that information just verbally from dispatch, but it doesn't go into the coding of the call in dispatch. Now, how we do get that information is in the military with a 9-line medevac. Now, obviously, this is a lot of information, and you wouldn't need most of this. A lot of times we get abbreviated 9 lines. But you would, if you got your mission information, you could probably get a brief code and number of patients. Like in line 5, we get number of patients. We also get number of patients by precedence. So urgency, we get that in line 3. But if you look at the 9-line and response determinants, it's what I expect that they would do in the narrative paragraph that no one would read in the mission manager would a blend of this and a 9-line to tell you what you're getting yourself into. And JJ did tight buckle. So obviously you don't, the location would be written in there. We get the locations of our missions right now. But you have to think, with radar and scanning, and the way, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. And this happens a lot in search and rescue. It happens frequently in helicopter EMS and even civilian, EMS running on an ambulance. You get dispatched to a general area because you don't have, a 10-digit grid or a street address. You get a witness report, that's third hand or something like that, and you're like, you have to go investigate. Well, the same thing would happen if, you're doing these search and rescue missions, and with the development of radar and scanning, which again is that holistic system between vehicles and characters, players, you could get dispatched, and part of the nature of the mission, it might tell you you're going to this exact location, or it can tell you we have a report of this in this area, but we don't know where exactly they are. And so it could be a crashed ship and you don't have the exact location. It could be a disabled ship out in space. It could be some people working outside of an outpost, or near a cave or in a cave. The nature will, that information will tell you, okay, and that will give you a zone and how that will look like on the UI on the star map. But you have to go there, and essentially you'd have to use the new FPS radar or the new vehicle radar and scan system to do a scan wave to look for POI, points of interest, and then be like, okay, well, I did the scan wave thing, and I've got 3 pings here, here, and here, and now I need to go check those out to figure out which one is the location that I'm looking for. And maybe you get to one and it's just some debris from, another wreck, or it's, some space rocks or something like that. Or it's another ship that's mining and has nothing to do with your call. But then you get to the third one down the line and aha, there we go. Now we found the damaged ship, the disabled ship, the ship that's on fire, whatever. Or the wrecked ship on the surface, and that's where we need to go to then look for our victims. Line 2, you're not going to get radio frequency and call sign. You don't need that. Sometimes you'll have a number of patients. Sometimes you don't. If it's a vague report, and that's part of the nuance. That's part of this is a fake call, just another tank junkie. Yeah. But that's part of the challenge of the mission is sometimes you'll know exactly what you're getting into and you can really prepare for it. And a lot of times you don't, and you just have to make do and do the best you can with what you got once you get there. And that might mean mission failure for you. And that's part of the building of tension of going to something. If you go someplace and your report, both in the part you read as well as what you get dispatched from the dispatcher says, hey, we've got a report of a disabled ship that was attacked in this general area. We don't the call was garbled, but it sounds like they have multiple severe, they could have potentially multiple severe injuries. We don't know if the pirates are on site or not. We don't have an exact location. And so you don't have an exact location. You don't know how many patients you have. You don't know the severity of their injuries. You don't know the state of their ship, and what that will entail in just for you to get access to those patients. You don't know if there are, let's see, where is it? Line 6, if there's enemy in the area, the possible, known, none. So all that sort of stuff would build a whole lot of tension, and then could very well surprise you, and lead to mission failure, or leading you to do something that we do frequently, not frequently, but we do in civilian EMS, is call for additional resources, because you get there and you're like, this is not as reported at all, and I need help. I don't have the resources to manage this. So are you standing up your own in-game services? Are you asking me personally, or are you asking like what are we doing in this mission? But that's what the 9 line is about, and what you get in the contract and the mission manager would give you either would address the things in here that you know would be relevant to gameplay, whether it's either it's known or it's unknown. And when it's known, it would give you you know some of that information. Asking if you're going to make your own med runners. Am I going to make my own org? I don't have any intention of making my own org. I won't have any time for that for a long time. Would I like to join an org like that? Yes. But at the same time, I'm much more interested in PvE content. So I'd like to do that content with an org, just because it's more fun doing that sort of thing, especially because a lot of this stuff would be team and group gameplay, you know, teams of 2, 3, you know, groups of 4 or more, in order to get this stuff done. I'm not interested in providing these services to another org who's involved in a PvP war. You know, maybe later on down the line, it's just not my bag. Maybe doing it for players who are engaged in PvE content. Absolutely. You know, a player puts up a beacon, you know, because they're out doing a mission. Yeah, sure. But I am very much interested in, you know, doing this sort of content PvE because when we talk about the modular, you know, the modularity of the mission system, how all these things change based off what's known, what's unknown, what actually occurs is a different module that they have plugged into the mission, you know, essentially at random, but also based off of you know things occurring within Star Sim and oh gosh, the probability volumes. That would determine how these modules of the mission get plugged in and what you would find in what locations. You know, you would find a lot more of the simpler, more alpha level calls in Terra, around Terra Prime, you know, or around Microtech. Whereas in Pyro, you're going to get you know a lot more Delta level calls. Now, will you get Delta level calls in Stanton? Sure. There's gonna be disaster type things that will happen on stations and at distribution centers and stuff where you've got multiple severe patients. You don't know how many. You know they are. There's a fire and there's leaking radiation and chemicals, all that sort of stuff. You know, and that will be just as challenging as you know going to a war zone with wounded. But I think that these sort of things would be more likely to happen. Not more of them in terms of volume, but more likely in terms of percentage of occurrence out of the total call volume in a place called Pyro, where it's very combat heavy. But yeah, so this is how you would get the sort of information you would get in your mission, and then you can imagine how the comms call would come through in order, and how the dispatcher would explain this to you. You know, and they could, you know, it wouldn't be a lot of recording in order to do these things, in order to get the variety that they need. It's not a ton of lines. Mostly your EMS calls will be because some junkie flopped in front of a mini ball. I mean, that would be kind of funny. You know, you get overdose calls in Grim Hex and you know even in cities, you know, off the beaten path. You know, in Lorville and Area 18, you know, you go down an alleyway and stuff, and you know, though a lot of times those are bravos because you're like, there's a guy who I can't tell if he's sleeping or if he's overdosed. It looked like he was breathing. And we call that a Bravo. And you go check it out. So we talked about the location of the pickup site, you know, and how your location You might not, you probably would frequent, especially, with the nature of the space-based ones, but even on the planet-based ones, a lot of times unless you're going to a specific point of interest that's known, where you'd have an organization or a group requesting help at that location, you wouldn't know the exact location. And so let's listen to what they talked about at CitizenCon 2953 about how vehicle radar and scanning, what their plans are. Let's see, we'll turn off that.
Let's talk a little bit more about the future of scanning, if people are interested in hearing about that. So what is the future of scanning? We'll touch on it lightly. At the moment, there are two main ways for you to interact with the scanning gameplay loops. The first one's obviously the scan, and the second one's the ping system. And both of these are going to be merged into a single system known as a scan wave. When you send the scan wave out, if you get any successful pings, what will happen is it will immediately populate your HUD with an AR marker, giving you information about what you've been able to scan, as well as starting to give you far more interesting information than you get now, rather than just the name of the ship. The underlying system will work on the signature system, similar to what it does today, and there are two main scans. There is the quick scan. The quick scan is just a low version of it. It has a very small impact on your own signal output, so if you want to stay a little bit more covert and potentially not be seen looking at something you shouldn't, you can use that one instead. The main benefits are small increase to your actual passive detection range, as well as being able to detect things that maybe are a little fainter than you should be able to see. This has a decent amount of cutting through interference, but not phenomenal. The other version is the charge scan. The charge scan is the big scan. Now, this will actually allow you to detect things up to quantum boost range, which is way, way further than the current passive detection range. And not only that, but it'll actually drop a marker allowing you to jump straight to that location for whatever it is that you found. Now, you don't want to be jumping in blind. And as I said, it's going to give you way more information than it did before. Some examples, but not limited to this, are things like, whatever it is it charging a quantum drive? Is it firing? Is the shields generating? Does it have any shields? Is it perhaps charging an EMP? Maybe it's got a snare up trying to catch you. It gives you that additional information so you can make the decision whether you actually want to get to that location. That's just a brief glimpse into the future of scanning and what our vision is for it.
So, with that information, knowing what we know, if you got dispatched to an area, and it's just like anything else in an MMO where you need to go search an area and you just walk around, uncovering the grayed out zone. But you'd have to go to an area and you'd have to do your scan wave in order to then, find the points of interest that you could then quantum boost to. And then, you quantum boost and you get there and you're like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Well, now you have found the location. And so once you find the location and you get to it, you get an update from dispatch and you'd be like, okay, sweet. That's what, that's the ship we're looking for. Or, you found the victims down there on the planet. Good job. Like say if it's a ship or something, they would update you and be like, okay, go ahead and approach that ship and let's scan it so we can figure out what we're looking, scan it for life signs, find out what we're looking for. And that would tell you, the state of the ship. Is it disabled? Is it intact? Is there atmosphere on board? Is there gravity? It might tell you, okay, I've got three life signs. Maybe it would give you, I know that there's 3, potentially 5 more, or something like, maybe it gives you a range because it can't tell. Maybe that's something that having the right type of radar/scanner would help with. And, once you get that information, it would progress along the mission, and then they tell you, okay, okay, now we need to, say it's a derelict ship out in space, a disabled ship out in space, or maybe it's even intact. And, now the dispatcher says, okay, good job scanning, scanning the target ship. Now we need to, find a way aboard. And now it's up to you. This actually we're out of order. So I did this video a couple years ago about boarding actions in Star Citizen. And this part right here isn't just related to the boarding actions, but it's really relevant to accessing the patient. And they talked about this back in the Lore Makers community questions, as well as hinted at it in the description of the rescue and transport missions. So rescuing imperiled clients. And then they mention... in the broader field of search and rescue, responders need the skills and gear to address and overcome many different disaster scenarios. As a result, they are far more likely to carry armor and weapons, along with multi-tools, fire extinguishers, and other more specific pieces of equipment, depending on the nature of the beacon they're responding to. So if you know the nature of the beacon, you know that you need a cutting tool. If you know that they're deep in a facility, you might want the two-handed one versus the one-handed one, or you might need to bring more batteries. If you get a report that tells you that the ship is on fire or there's a fire at the facility that has caused multiple casualties, you're going to bring firefighting equipment. You're going to wear a suit that protects you from fire and heat better. But if you don't know that information, you're not going to find out until you get there. And start doing some scanning. And so you have to hope that you came prepared. Otherwise, you might have to find a different way of doing it or call for help, call for additional resources. So when I did this video about boarding actions, I looked at some of these tools that we could use not only for rescue missions, but for anything where you need to gain access to an area. How do I get aboard? We've talked about the why of boarding actions. Now it is time to talk about the how. Earlier, we briefly touched on some of the deliverables in development, some of them being directly related to how you'd make entry into the target ship, station, or facility. Whether you're hacking, cutting, or breaching, the method you use to reach the interior of the target is largely based on what the mission parameters are, and of course, personal preference, as well as what equipment is available. Just like in many other games you've played, there may be missions where you have to remain undetected, or where the opposing force is so overwhelming that being detected would go badly for you. Hacking or cutting may be the better option then. You could have a mission where time and speed are of the essence, and then breaching and rapid entry are preferred. A rescue mission for a friendly target may only require that you supply an airlock with power in order for it to function and for you to make entry. Technique is largely situation dependent. So it doesn't, even in a non-combat situation, it's situation dependent on what you need to do. If the ship is intact or it's powered, but the crew is, downed and out or something, you may need to just force the door, or maybe you can just hack the door in order to get aboard the ship. Maybe it's a space station. Maybe it's a distribution center. Any number of things. The doors could be broken. There could be collapsed debris in front of them. All these different things would be in between you and getting to your patient. And you may know that, generally there are victims back here, and I've done a scan, an FPS scan, and I can tell that they're back this way and I need to get there. But I've got these obstacles in the way. I've got these things that are preventing me from getting there. And so you're going to need these types of tools in order to gain access. And it won't be in every mission, but, depending on what dispatch information you get, will determine how prepared you get, and whether you want to take an alpha level call, and just go with your ship and your med gun and maybe some pens and or you want to take a Delta level call with, it's a MCI, mass casualty incident, with unknown severity of injuries, and the atmosphere is vented out of the ship, and there's radiation leaking, blah, blah, blah. That builds a whole lot of tension just in the dispatch. That's part of the job. That's one of the things that gets everybody all adrenaline junkied up, is knowing, hey, we're going into this situation. Holy shit, this is serious. And we've got, a really sick or injured person, or multiples of them. And so that builds that tension, especially if you have a dispatcher. It's one thing if the dispatcher in the comms call is giving you a sort of laissez-faire, yeah, it's just an alpha level call, easy peasy, easy money. But, they could be doing some really good voice acting and face acting, and really dispatching those Delta and Echo level calls with some seriousness, and encouraging rapidity. And so, now either before and or after you've made entry to the location, you've accessed the location, well, you also need to locate the patients. So, okay, sweet, we found the location. Maybe it's a building, maybe it's a ship, maybe it's a cave or a ravine, and you have to find a way to traverse the terrain to get down there safely. That could be something where we end up needing jetpacks or some sort of zip line tool, in the future. But once you use those sort of things to gain access to where the patients are, but you also have to find out where they are. And so also at CitizenCon 2053, we got a brief glimpse at FPS radar and scanning, which again, they're working on in conjunction as part of that holistic system. And these are two of the biggest parts of what would be involved in a good rescue mission, is vehicle radar and scanning in order to find the scene of the call, because the best ones wouldn't give you a fixed location, or I think the best ones wouldn't. It adds more gameplay if you're having to scan to find the dang place. But then using not having a specific marker that tells you, like right now with our investigation missions, it tells you to investigate these points. Okay, that's lame. But once you have FPS radar and scanning, okay, sweet, I made entry to this 890 jump. Now I need to find the bodies, and okay, I'm doing my scan wave from my FPS radar in order to, okay, it tells me that there's someone over here. I'm too far away to know that they're alive or dead. Or I got a scan here in the hangar and there's nothing. I need to proceed deeper into the ship. Or in a distribution center, and I'm like, okay, I'm close enough that I can tell that there is an injured person at the end of this hallway, but I don't know how severe their injury is. Or maybe depending on how, what suit you're wearing, can detect, it can detect whether they're alive or dead, and depending on, it can detect at a further distance, the severity of their injury to help with triage. Because that's another big thing, is the nature of these missions could get really cool with multiple patients if you're like, okay, I've got maybe you're doing your terrapin, rescue terrapin, and you only have one tier 2 bed. Okay, well, now you need, and you've got reports of multiple patients with varying injuries. You want to find the most severe injuries first in order to stabilize those before you go and grab the less injured people. If you want to, kind of like, traditional rescue missions in MMOs where, you've got 6 patients, or after you scan, it says, okay, you've got 6 patients. If you want the full payout, you got to help all 6. If you go grab the 3 greens before you even get to a red, and the red dies before you get to them, well, now you only rescued 3 and you only get a partial payout. So that's where the radar and scanning could come in, and having specialized suits and armor is helping you with the A, locating the patients, and B, determining the nature of the patients to help you triage them. So you do a scan, you find 3 of them, and you're okay. Well, this one's I've got a green over here and a red over here and a yellow over here. I'm gonna go take the red first, and then I'll come back for the yellow, and then I'll go get the green, in order to get that max payout. Or if you have multiple people, maybe you are equipped as a full-on medic, but your friends only have a paramed device and some extrication equipment. Okay, have them go grab the lower acuity patients. You go grab the higher acuity patient.
Now we fix the damage, we need to find the enemies that caused it. While we're on the way, you'll notice that the on-foot emissions at the top of the screen. We're emitting infrared, electromagnetic radiation, and also sound. If any of these go higher than the background levels, it will be easier for the enemies to detect us. Let's take a look at the bad guy's bone. As part of the emissions and radar tech, we also have the ability to scan while we're on foot. If we tap the button, we can do a quick scan to reveal info about anything that's in our view currently. Okay, Bone, let's do a quick scan. This highlights whatever's in our line of sight. There's also some risk and reward to the scanning system. By holding the button, we can...
So that quick scan could allow you to be like, okay, I've got multiple victims right here, and rather than having to go up and scan with your med gun, each one to determine what injuries they have, you could do, if you have got the appropriate medical suit or armor, it could do a quick scan and at least give you a color. Because that's something that we do in triage when you have a mass casualty incident, multiple patients, is you use a very simplified system. You're not doing a detailed assessment. You're just doing the absolute basics to determine is this person severely injured, moderately injured, or minimally injured. And that's something I think that would be appropriate within the remit of a medical suit, is to be able to do that scan wave and just give you put a color over that person that's laying there on the ground. Are they red, orange, or green, or red, orange, or yellow? Something like that. Red, orange, or green. I don't know. So another thing, when we talked about tools, we talked about hacking. We talked about the thing that forces the door open. We talked about breaching charges, which would blow it open, cutting. The other thing that you have to worry about in search and rescue missions is, you have to gain access to the patient. You have to extricate the patient from the environment, and that means not only getting past those obstacles and getting the patient past those obstacles, but there's also environmental threats. And so the obvious environmental threat, from the 9 line is enemy in the area. Are the pirates still there? Are the Vandal still there? And as the medic, are you going to neutralize them, or are you going to try and sneak your patients out? Or did you bring security with you? Hopefully, you did. Otherwise, are you, prepared to handle it yourself, or do you have to wait for people, again, call for assistance? But now we have not only the radiation zones in game right now, and so you can imagine a lot of the industrial facilities, even the space stations and ships could have leaking radiation due to damage from power plants. And so with engineering and resource network, anytime your power plant gets damaged aboard your ship, it could start leaking, to a certain extent, it could start leaking radiation and create radiation zones that could cause injuries that require healing. That's already a thing now, but also create a hazard for you to navigate in game. But we also know that fire is going to be coming soon. We also know that you have the life support system, and so that's another hazard. Does your patient have to, in order to get back to your ship, do they have, is there a breathable atmosphere, or are they wearing the right equipment? how do you get them back? Or is their suit, empty of air, and do you need to resupply them with air to get them back to the ship? So let's watch a little bit about fire.
Together.
A fire that is left unchecked will spread throughout your ship. And if it does this and it reaches your ship components,
System is offline.
then you'll be having a very bad day. And this could lead to your ship being both crippled or destroyed. So this means you will be able to put out fires using a fire extinguisher. Where possible, we have made sure that fire extinguishers are readily available throughout our ships.
The extinguishers, they're very simple to use. They are point and shoot. You have to be careful that you don't start flailing wildly with your extinguisher. If you have to aim at the base of your fire and then keep it there to cool down the surface and take away enough of the heat and the oxygen so that the fire calms down. There will be a temperature readout where you can see how strong the fire is still where you're aiming.
And you need to keep your finger on the trigger until it actually goes out. Fires can just be smoking there, and technically it's very close to being on fire. So you really do want to make sure it's really out before you move on. Because if you just leave them smoking and then go wandering off, there's a good chance it will heat up again and catch fire again. It's worth knowing that a fire extinguisher has a limited amount of ammo within it. To your benefit, you can also take your fire extinguishers back to where they are stored, plug them in, and then they will recharge the ammo. However, it is important to know that if your ship doesn't have a functioning life support at this moment, the recharge will not work.
If you
Thank you. Sorry about that. So a lot of things to consider in just accessing the people that needing rescue, because sometimes you'll know the exact location, sometimes you won't. If you don't know it, you have to go find it. And once you find it, then you may have the exact location of the patient. That may be part of the difficulty of the call.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Halifaxan, thanks so much for the follow. Really appreciate it. But that could be one of the things. It could be a lower level call, gives you a lower level payout. More of a newer player rescue mission, gives you the exact point of interest location wherever they are, and gives you, once you get there, gives you a marker for the person, because it's at a known location with the person who called it in is there with them and stuff, and they can direct you right to that patient. And then you can take them back to your ship and either treat them on site or treat and transport them to a hospital or clinic. But a lot of these higher level missions, as you progress within this profession, would give you more and more gameplay and more and more challenges within different aspects of gameplay during the mission that would dictate that payout. Now, if you guys remember that when they're doing the cargo mission development and the payout for those, they had that algorithm thing that dictated the payout, based off of how much cargo and how far you're going, and if there's danger, blah, blah, blah. Well, they could use a similar algorithm system in order to dictate the payout that would be structured based off the mission, and the number of things that you have to do that contributes to the amount of difficulty, that contributes to the amount of preparedness and potential supplies that you would use. And so it would scale appropriately, whether you're going to a known location with a known patient of a low-level injury to a unknown location with an unknown number of patients with unknown threats, and or environmental hazards, and unknown access to the patient. All of that stuff makes for a much higher payout, much more difficult, and potentially, in my opinion, would be really fun to do in a co-op environment, where you spread out those tasks among people in a team, just like we do in real life. If I'm, I was a firefighter for years, and the engine crew, everybody on the engine has different tasks when you get to a fire, when you get to a wreck, a car wreck. If we go to, go on a SAR mission or something like that, everybody has a different role. And it also dictates what you're carrying. So you have, one person carrying a two-handed cutter. Another person has some breaching charges in their backpack. One person is prepared to hack. You've got a fully fledged medic. Everybody has some first aid supplies. You've got your ship configured. Maybe you take two ships. Maybe you take a medical ship and then, a ship that provides combat escort as well as like a Hornet. What's it, the Hornet? What's the Hornet that has the radar? Oh gosh, brain fart. Anyway, you know what I mean. You structure it based off of what you get in your dispatch information. How you go prepared for that mission, and then your payout scales accordingly. So after you've gone through all that, you've gotten your mission, you've prepared for your mission, you've made your way to the location, you've made your way through the location to where the patients are, navigating the obstructions and the hazards and the threats, and now you finally get to your patient. Well, I'm not going to talk a lot about medical gameplay because this is more. I wanted to talk more about the search and rescue aspect of it, simply because these are things that we just talked about are known things for Star Citizen. These are known knowns. We know that we're getting FPS and vehicle radar and scanning that will do these things, and that that's how it will work for other missions, for other aspects of gameplay, so they can be easily applied in a modular mission system to rescue missions. What we don't know is how the further iterations of medical gameplay will work. We know what we have. We know that healing will take resources. And so that's part of your planning is you will, based off of whatever information you have about the number of patients and the number of injuries could determine what resources you take, as well as saying if you do get information that says, hey, the requester is asking you to heal on site. Thank you, Hornet Tracker. So you could be going to a distribution center for Kovalex, and they said, hey, we've got some deadlines to meet, and we had an accident down in the cargo area, and we've got 5 injured people with mild to moderate injuries. Can you come heal them on site so they can get back to work? Or maybe that's a more of a Hurston Dynamics thing. I don't know. We can't, or they can't afford the downtime of them being extracted to a hospital or clinic. And so that would tell you that you would say, okay, I likely need more resources to do the full-on healing of these injuries on site versus what I would need to treat their symptoms, to stabilize their injuries, because that's what should be the differentiation, is if you are just stabilizing the injuries and then transporting them to a hospital for definitive treatment, it should take far less resources. And that could be information that you get at the beginning of the call. That could be information that you get once you locate and diagnose the patients, once you have scanned them and figured out the nature of their injuries. The dispatcher comes over and he says, okay, now that we've got that information, Shub and Interstellar is saying that we need you, is asking you to stabilize them and transport them to this station that they own so they can treat them. Or they could say that Shubin is saying, hey, they've authorized you to treat on site. And so now you go ahead and treat on site. And that could be part of the mission. And maybe, they say, authorize you to treat on site if you have the resources. And if you don't, okay, well, you don't get the payout for treating on site, and that would be a bonus payment. But now you can still transport them, on your medical ship back to a hospital or clinic, and you can still get paid, but you don't get the bonus payment for doing what they asked. Because that's a thing that these places will do, that they will offer as part of their packages and say, hey, we've sent people out to check on you, and they've diagnosed you with this, and we can bring you back to civilization, or we can bring you these resources and we can treat you on site. And companies and agencies and governments and individuals will say, I'm all the way out here. I don't want to go all the way back and then have to all the way come back here. I don't want to start over again. And players especially would say that, but these NPC missions would do the same thing. You get no guns, sit down, shut up. But that's the big differentiation. Now, the other aspects of the medical gameplay, I think, is, and this is me speculating, because right now, as far as I'm aware and from what I can tell, because obviously, like, we do get injuries more often than we did before, but it's still not a lot, and there's still going to be a lot of balancing left to do. But right now, you don't need to stabilize a tier 3 injury. There's no stabilization needed. But tier 2 and tier 1 injuries do require stabilization. But you can stabilize all injuries at a tier 3 bed. Whether that will stay that way, we don't know. What stabilization is going to entail in comparison to medical gameplay, we don't know. But I think that for medical missions, especially for the ones where you are going to be treating and transporting, and I think that should be the majority of medical missions, because that's the most likely outcome for most search and rescue right now. And I imagine that would be most likely, more often than not, in most missions in the game. Is they want to treat and they want you to be transported back to a hospital for definitive care. And the reason we do that now is because it's far more cost effective than to bring the resources to heal a severe injury out to the field. Now, again, if the requester authorizes that, sweet, and you're prepared, boom, you just got a big old bonus payment. But that means you made the investment up front to have those resources to be able to heal those severe injuries. But I think they're going to have to put a lot of emphasis on stabilization of injuries and differentiate that gameplay enough to incentivize players to use it, not only for themselves, but also for missions. And I think that's probably going to be how they differentiate those missions, in that they don't give you the option for these NPC missions to heal on site. They say no, that they don't want you to heal on site. They want you to treat and transport them, and they won't give you the option to heal them, or they won't authorize payment. And so if you heal them, it's like, okay, well, you just gave away a bunch of resources for free. But that's another part of that mission, is if they don't authorize treatment on site for a severe injury, you have to stabilize them. And I think that they need to differentiate stabilization based off of bed tier. And if you don't have a tier 1 bed, you can't stabilize a tier 1 injury. But if you have a tier 2 bed, you can delay the effects of that injury. You can slow, that countdown for them. I think that would be a better way, because that way, having the appropriate ship with the appropriate beds in order to provide transport to give you time to get them back to the right facility would be the right thing. Because I do think they need to go back to having tier 2 beds at space stations, not having them everywhere. That way, if you have a tier 1 injury and you have a tier 2 bed, okay, sweet, we need to get you all the way back to New Babbage. And that'll be a little bit of a trip. But You have to do the stabilization gameplay, and maybe you have to continue to stabilize them en route. Because that would be really cool gameplay and incentivize multi-crew in that you've got your medical terrapin. If you fly it solo and you've got a patient with a tier 1 injury, you have to continue to stabilize over time. Every few minutes you have to do more stabilization in order to keep the injury from progressing while you're en route back to the hospital with that tier 1 bed. If you want that higher level payout, because you kept their severe injury from progressing, you need to have a second person to continue to provide that medical care, unless while you're flying, unless you're going to get out of the seat and do it, and you'd only be able to do that in quantum. Well, if you're only quantuming for short periods of time, the rest of the time you're actively flying. And so I think again, that's how things work in real life. I don't just stabilize someone and then just set it and forget it. I mean, some patients are like that. They're easier to stabilize, but the most severe patients, I'm constantly monitoring, constantly making changes, and it's stressful and it's a lot of work. It's also engaging, and it would make for very engaging gameplay if you have to constantly monitor these patients to keep them from progressing from a severe injury to death, or a severe injury to downed, or a severe leg injury worsens and creates another leg injury or something like that. I don't know how they want to do it. There's more to do with medical gameplay, but I think that's ultimately where rescue missions need to go in order to make them engaging, in order to make them challenging, and make your palms a little bit sweaty, give you a little bit of threat. You've got a timer. It's almost like doing the cargo missions with the cargo that goes, not just not just Quantanium, but there's other volatile cargoes where if they're not, they can only be out of that stable environment for so long before they go boom. Well, this is essentially that same thing, but it's a character. It is now out of that. It's out of that stable environment. You have found them. You have diagnosed them, and now they can proceed to boom. The countdown can go down if you don't continue to keep them stabilized, and if you don't have the right bed, that countdown will progress faster, or you'll have a shorter time, and so. Oh, well, we need to fly fast. And then you have to land in the hangar and put them in that little thing. And essentially it acts like a freight elevator, and mission complete, burrito I eat. But yeah, so, and also that dictates knowing what hospitals and clinics provide what level of service. If you take a patient with a tier 1 injury to a clinic with a tier 2 bed, and again, I want that to be changed. Tier 1 beds only at major hospitals, tier 2 beds at clinics, because it doesn't make sense to have a tier 1 bed at a urgent care in a space station, or maybe eventually the right medical ship that you could deliver them to, because you've got that could be part of your continuum of gameplay. Is you're taking these missions in your Anvil C8R and you're bringing patients back to your galaxy with medical module. But that's another part of you have to know where you can take those patients to. That's part of my job, is knowing what hospitals have what capabilities. And if I take a patient to a hospital that doesn't have the capability to take care of them, it's a big fuck up on my part. And so if you take a patient with a tier 1 injury to a clinic with a tier 2 bed, okay, well, you'll get paid. They're going to have to transfer them to another hospital, but you get a lower payout. Zeta Polonide, thank you very much. Yeah, I think there's that one, maybe one more, but that's the one I remember from Xenothreat. A lot of different elements within these rescue missions that provide a lot of variety in terms of the scale and scope of the mission, the payout of the mission in terms of UEC and reputation, the number of people that you bring with you, and how you and your team prepare, which ship you use, as well as the tension for the amount of tension for the mission. And sometimes you might just have a little while and you just want to do some chill medical missions that are not much more than a chill hauling mission gameplay. But maybe you're in the mood for something engaging and kind of stressful, and that requires some preparation and planning and cooperative gameplay. All of these things and all these different modules that Elliot and team could build into this archetype of mission could provide a whole lot of variety and a lot of interesting things to a lot of people, not just people who want to do the medical gameplay. But yeah, that's all I have for this Scanner Anomaly. I'm going to switch back to screen. And it's been a little bit of a longer show, but thank you guys for sticking with me through it. I hope you found this information interesting and fun to talk about. If you have any questions or any other thoughts, please hop in my Discord and come chat with me or the other members of the community. I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this later on YouTube or you want to see all these things that I just showed you, the show notes will be in the description of the podcast when I upload it to YouTube. But thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed chatting with you guys and hearing your thoughts. It's been a little bit of a longer show, but that's because we went through the Roadmap Roundup, we went through the monthly report, and we did a Scanner Anomaly that was a little bit of a long one, but it was something I wanted to cover in detail, and it's something I'm pretty hyped for. Maverick69 says, do you think there is some confusion surrounding the discussion of what Death of a Spaceman and the medical regeneration process is supposed to be by 1.0? Yes. There's a lot of confusion. There are a lot of people who just assume that Death of a Spaceman is dead, which is stupid because they keep saying it's not dead. And there's no indication that it's dead. The only indication was the silly Ursa medevac. That was it. And then they went ahead and continued to reiterate that no, it was not dead. They haven't said anything about regeneration getting easier. In fact, there's been more lore. There's no death of a Spaceman. Nope. But there's been more lore since then that has reiterated that there's consequences, that there's negative symptoms to regeneration. We're dealing with regeneration issues right now where people are dying. And people think, it's like, it's not always going to be this way. We are definitely not where we need to be for things to get easier in game. There's a lot more friction to be removed before we have more consequences, in my opinion. Yeah, it's the death of a spaceman. The death of a spaceman. Yeah. Jesus, Blizzrad. Why is that like? Oh, that's my camera. But it's the, I think the next big step is getting more actor status in. Yeah, I think the current regen crisis absolutely has to be linked into it. It's the lead up to getting us to Death of a Spaceman and having regen actually be regen. But right now, the current actor status system doesn't allow for differentiation between backspace meaning death and backspace meaning you got an ambulance ride to a hospital, because that's what it's in. That's part of what it's intended to be. Is you are meant to be able to be downed and say backspace and say, okay, that means I'm not going to wait for a friend to come pick me up. It means that an NPC came and picked me up, or a player got the contract, and I got whisked away magically, but the player came and picked up a character body and did the mission. But that's part of what Richard Tyrer calls the 3 deaths. And when he says deaths, he doesn't mean you actually died for the first one. He means that you just respawned. And that's the thing that people need to get out of their heads, is that with Star Citizen's vision, respawn doesn't always mean death. Respawn can mean you wake up in a hospital after blacking out, and then a hospital came and picked you up, or an ambulance came and picked you up and dragged you to that hospital. Just how it works in real life. I can't tell you how a lot of my patients, especially the majority of them, now that I'm a flight medic, and so many of my patients are completely unconscious and intubated and sedated and all that. They have backspace, but they didn't die, and they wake up eventually in a hospital bed. That's what CIG wants. That's what Richard Tyrer and Chris Roberts have described, both in the original Death of a Spaceman and the updates of the Death of a Spaceman, and in the information on Regen. They specifically said it, but people don't read it. They get the Cliff Notes version, and so they don't know that this is what CIG has reiterated time and time again, is that they want for you to be downed and injured, and to be able to say, okay, well, I don't want to wait here for a player or an NPC to come get me. I'm not going to be able to finish this mission. I'm too injured. I don't want to be revived on site. I'm just going to go back and reevaluate. And so you press backspace and you fade to black and you wake up in a hospital bed and you didn't regen. You just got treated and transported, just like what these missions would do. Expecting me to read. This is why I watch you. And that's the problem is, I only have a small but dedicated following, and I love you guys and I appreciate you guys, but this is a thing that few people follow with much interest because it isn't involved in the game right now, so they don't care. And so when you have discussions with people about this stuff, they get violent. They get angry about it because they think that, no, that's not how it's going to be. And it's like, well, that's just because that's how it's always been in Star Citizen doesn't mean that's how it's always going to be in Star Citizen. It's the same way with ships. And that's how CAG has described it, is they want ships to be disabled and be repaired. And they want players to be disabled and be repaired. They don't want the big boom for ships. They don't want the big die for players. That needs to be a rare thing. That's the ultimate goal. It's always been that way as the ultimate goal, but they haven't been able to achieve it. And here we are with engineering and Resource Network and Maelstrom Armor coming along to make that vision a reality for ships. But people think it'll never happen to characters. And I'm like, just because other games don't do it this way doesn't mean Star Citizen wouldn't do it this way. That's the exact reason why they would do it this way, because other games don't do it this way. But people have a hard time with that concept because other games don't do it that way. You're just used to quick, die and respawn. Yeah, Maverick, you're absolutely right. There is a huge disparity. Probably doesn't even begin to describe how uninformed the vast majority of the community is about Death of a Spaceman and Regen and CIG's plans for medical. If the quickest summary is, we have tier 0 medical in game right now. Tier 0. And hold up what tier 0 medical is, and then hold it up next to mining, where mining is now, compared to when we first got mining. Because what we first got for mining was, years ago, was tier 0. And mining has progressed and progressed and progressed. And we don't even have refining yet. And medical hasn't progressed hardly at all. Yeah. I wonder how far ahead medical is in Squadron 42. I don't know if it's all that much farther, just because we probably don't engage in a lot of medical gameplay. I think that's why we have what we have in Star Citizen, because that's all we need for Squadron. I think we would have gotten updated if there was more in Squadron via CitizenCon and the updates around Squadron. I don't know. That's just me. We'll see. But anyway, it's late. I got to call it a night. I appreciate all you guys. Thank you for your input, and thanks for coming on and hanging out with me and chatting with me. I look forward to hearing more with you guys. Yeah, here's hoping for SAR missions in episode 2. Yep. You guys all have a great night. Let's find somebody to raid real fast, and we will pay it forward.